tribes of Hebrews. This is basically what they're looking for. That wasn't what it referred to. It was the original 12 tribes of humans that preceded him. It was the five cloister races and 7 root races they're talking about. Okay, so go back to our history. 12 tribes meant what we're talking about here as far as the root and cloister races. Now, coming up to the third seeding, which is our seeding. Each seeding, before a root race could come in, there had to be things done. There had to be a host race to birth that race through. The host race that we had were called the Urtites. The Urtites were a hybrid race that combined something called the Ceres Egyptians, which I'll explain a little bit, from Ceres B, and the Hebrew Palladians, and the Rama races from the earth. Now, where are they going to be? We're seed 3. Okay? These guys were remnants from seed 2. Now, seeding number 2 ended because all hell broke loose, and it was war again. It was major war. It was called the 1,000 Years' War. And basically, we ended up in full tilt with that. We ended up where higher councils we call them councils of light, so because they look like what the Rishi levels had to intervene, or they would have totally blown the planet out of the galaxy. And there was an agreement made, and again, it was between the Anunnaki races, and I'll get back later, I will get to where they started. Anunnaki races versus the right for humans to evolve here. There was a treaty made called the Treaty of El Anu, which the Elohim agreed to allow some of the Anunnaki strains to hybridize with the human lineage so that they could evolve. We're trying to be fair. Okay, you want to evolve from 12 strands, you want to get rid of your genetic mutations. Yes, you can do this, but you have to not try to wipe out the race like that, because they have been trying, the Anunnaki have been trying to wipe out our race all those seedings. This is who we were fighting with from the first seeding. This is who we were fighting with on Tara before the fall of man down here, before the mess happened here. The Anunnaki races were originally part of the weird races we came out of. The Anunnaki are a mutated version of what's called the Anahazi. The Anahazi are the core first founder race that every race in the time universe came out of. It was one host race, and it was an Elohistic family that created it, and that was the Anahazi race. And they were liquid light beings. They were harmonic 4 liquid light beings, and then they downscaled into matter-dense races. The Anahazi hold the original 12-strand imprint, but they also hold the imprint for the other 12 levels of codes. They go up to ascended mastery for the whole lineage, for everything, for the Syrians, the Palladians, everybody. Okay? What happened to create an Anunnaki is you take an Anahazi and you combine it with one of the race creations of the dark avatars, the 7th matrix. And you start mutating Anahazi codes. You start unplugging the 8th and 12th DNA strands and the ability to hold 8th and 12th dimensional consciousness. That's where the Anunnaki came from. Anunnaki means Anahazi mutated with draconian coding. The Draconians are one of the reptilian races created first by the dark avatar matrices. All of them are Elohistic families. We have not fallen elves and near fallen elves. And that's what it's all about. This is a family feud in the Elohim territories. Okay, and we're all part of it. Alright, now, so we have a little bit of where the Anunnaki came from there. Okay. Now, a little bit of where the Anunnaki came from there. Okay. Now, when we came in to the third seeding, it had been after the 1,000 Years' War, where everybody was destroyed. Some of them were evac'd out, depending on whoever they were connected to. Either the Anunnaki strains, they took their guys out, or the good guys took their guys out. Some of them went into the inner earth portals and just stayed there. They never came up again. They became the Rama races, the root races that had been part of seeding 2, which were the root races that were left from seeding 2. You had the Lemurian root race, its cloister race, the Urantrians. This is where you hear the stuff in the Urantrian books coming out. They're associated with the consciousness from there. And a race called the Brenoe, which were the cloister race for the Atlanteans. Okay. Now, these guys were ones that went underground rather than being taken off the planet. They evolved there to become the Rama races, and later the Rama races divided. And the runaway became the Shambhala, and the Orionians became affiliated, some of them with very dark matrices, and wreaked havoc on our evolution here in connection with our events. Okay, so we're dealing with races that were here because of the fact that we had been seeded here before. They're still part of our lineage, but they evolved in their own little pockets because most of the lineage had been destroyed here. All right, now, let's see. All right. When I'm talking about us being hosted first, we came in this third sitting by the Urtites, you also need to know who the Saris Egyptians are. All right, first of all, the Egyptians were a sub-race of the Atlantean race. That was their original, what an original Egyptian was. But that imprint has been changed and modified and upgraded so many times that it's something much different at this point. The Saris Egyptians are a hybridized version of Egyptian that became the primary Egyptian strain, that became the pharaonic line here. They were hybridized not just with cloister races, but with a race called the Saras from Harmonic 3, which is an etheric race. They gave them a lot of extra coding to try to get rid of some of the Anunnaki distortion that was happening in the gene codes there. So you ended up with basic Egyptians, which had the Anunnaki was getting more and more Anunnaki coding infiltration. And you had the Saris Egyptian, which came in to recalibrate the whole pattern. Alright, so they were made in seeding 2. They were, when everything went crazy during the Thousand Years' War, most of them were taken to Sirius B and in Harmonic 2. And that's where they evolved. Now, there's another group created in seeding 2 called the Hebrew, the original Hebrew people. The original Hebrew people were actually a mixed cloister race. They were half Melchizedek cloister, which is the cloister that went with the fifth root race, that's not Hyperion, and half Hyberu cloister, which went with the Aryan race. So they were taking 2 cloisters and making a hyper cloister, so it would have even stronger coding. This is how you can get some of the higher than 12-strand coding, but you can't activate all of it in one human body because it can only hold 12 codes. So you had these 2 amped up races, basically, the Saris Egyptians from Sirius B and the Hebrew Palladians, because this is where they got evacuated to when they were taken off planet. And they evolved there for a time until the third seeding. And then you had the Rama races from inner Earth. Well, what they did to create the third seeding was they took some of the Saris Egyptians, some of the Hebrew Palladians, and some of the Rama race, and combined them. And it created a race called the Urtites. And refers to light. It refers to light. It's really an ancient Anahazi language where it started. It means light, or light of the one, is what it really originally meant. So when you see priests of Urtites, it's an affiliation with the Ascended Master Healers, is what it's meant to mean. And that meaning was lost a long time ago, but that's what originally was associated. So we came through, our seeding came through the Urtites. And our seeding began about 800,000 years ago. A lot has happened between then and now. The most important thing, they evolved for a while. What they first put in through the Urtites was the 5 cloister races. They didn't bring in the root races yet. They brought in 5 cloisters. And 5 cloisters, you have the one that goes with the Romanians, which is Orion. You have the one that goes with the Atlanteans, which is Runaway. You have the one that goes with the Aryans, which is Hyberu. You have the ones that go with the Arians, which is Melchizedek. And you have the ones that go with the seventh root race. And that's, I think it's hard to pronounce. You and Jackie. It's in the book. It's hard to pronounce. So they brought the 5 cloisters in first. And they evolved for a while, and some of them intermixed. And already these cloisters were hyper cloisters because they were brought through the Saris Egyptian amped up ones and the Hebrew amped up ones. The Urtite imprint itself was amping up the gene code. When you amp up the gene code, you accelerate the evolution. You give the biological form a capacity greater than what it had to bring in the higher levels of consciousness more quickly. So a planet and its people could evolve more quickly. And that's why it was done that way, because we were trying to get this going already. It was like seed number 3, when are we going to get done with this? We never even got past root race 4, you know? Because we're stuck right in the middle right now. We're the Aryan, we're the most people on the planet, I won't say we, but most people on the planet are of the Aryan root race. there are still 2 root ray cycles to go after us. These cycles last thousands of years, and if they get cut off in between, then you go back to square one again. You know? So they amped it up this time to try to get us to the finish line, hopefully, in this season. The most important things that have affected us and the agendas that are happening now began about 669,000 years ago. It was during the cloister period. And the period I'm going to talk about, these things that happened during the cloister period, before the root races even got it. Okay, this time. The first thing that caused us problems, big problems, and divided things up into your basic 3 matrices of DNA that we talked about, the 3 agendas, was something called the temple wars. There were temples way before these temples, and very, very deep down, there are remnants of those temples under these temples. They haven't found them yet, but they found pieces. They're starting to find new pieces, and they don't fit with the Egyptian period, so they're Atlantean. They're older than some of the relics that are there. There are some things that were left behind. There are some things called signets that were left behind, which are metal discs that are key to the stargates. And there's at least 5 of them on the planet. There's 12 altogether. There are sites, and I know where 5 of them are, but I'm not allowed to tell on film anyway. So there are a few little telltale signs that this history is true. There's also things that are being found now in different areas, not just, I don't know if they've been found in Egypt, but I've heard that they're found in other countries, of humans with elongated skulls. What are they? You know, we're supposedly came out of the apes, right? Yeah, that's the nonsense we fed us. We didn't come out of the apes, we came out of the cloister races and such. The cloister races had elongated heads. That's what they looked like. They had, if you see the little statues of Akhenaten that runs around, now, Akhenaten didn't have a head like that, I hate to disappoint him, but he absolutely loved the anti-cloister races. So he tried to make himself appear as that eternally, forever, because that was his affiliation. But that head shape went with the cloister races, and there are variations on it that went with the Rama races, and that's what we saw on the wall in Nefertari's tomb today. And it amazed me, because I'd never seen any of the paintings down there. Look at that, oh my God, it's a Rama. They actually have a painting of a Rama on that wall. And it was perfect. It was like, I'm sure that was set up by higher levels for me to trip over a Rama, so he's going, look. We're going to talk about that today. Okay, so remember, the Ramas are the ones that were from the inner levels. Now, when the first set of temple wars, there's 3 basic temple wars. I mean, they're warring all over the place, but the 3 big ones, the first one started about 669,000 years ago. We call it the Vegan Wars, because where it really started was in the Vega and the Lyra star system, and in harmonic 3 and 4. It wasn't even our war. It was their war. It was the Elohim war. And it came out of the group of Elohim that had severed their connection from Source, wanting dominion over the Lyran system, and the ones who had just been there because they'd always been there, and they were just trying to be themselves. And there's just like every person has, you have your levels of consciousness, levels of identity in the harmonics, going up to 5 harmonics. Every planet does too. There is a planet, a liquid-like planet, in pre-matter density, in harmonic 4, that was called Aramatana. That was the corresponding planet to Earth. We had harmonic 4, Aramatana. We had harmonic 3, Gaia. Harmonic 2, Tara. Harmonic 1, Earth. Well, the Anahazi Lyrans were those who resided in the areas, the reality fields, and they're not exactly like this, but they were from Aramatana. And they were attacked by the ones from Vega. And Aramatana was destroyed. Before that destruction, there was a group of them that got out before their consciousness got blown apart. They had agreed to come and hold the coding piece by piece of the original pattern of Aramatana. So one day, it would be set back into the grids of Earth, Terra, and Gaia. So Earth, Terra, and Gaia could once again become a planet that was capable of passing back through the matter densities. A planet or a person that can pass through transmutation through the matter densities to get out of the time matrix is considered a person that can ascend or an ascension planet. Once upon a time, Earth, Terra, Gaia, Aramatana was an ascension planet. During the Vegan Wars, 669,000 years ago, that potential was taken away. That's where the Emerald Order came into play now, because we were part of the group that had agreed to hold those codes and to reset it into this grid when the time was right. Alright, so it's back to the 3rd time we had temple wars. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Now, what happened down here, as they were doing that up in Vega, it created a mess down here. The Rama races got involved. Both sides of the Anunnaki story got involved. We had the Cloister races, and the Syrian Council was trying to protect them. And you had the Anunnaki races and the Dracon races that were trying to wipe out our pattern. There were the middle zone ones that wanted to hijack the evolution, not destroy, hijack it. They actually did something called a forced matrix transplant. Now this is something, if you did it on a person, it would be taking that person's energy field and forcefully plugging it into another consciousness field so that consciousness would take over and recode it to itself. It's like body snatching. Possession. This can be done in planetary fields too, not by us, but the higher ones. They took the Gaian imprint of Earth on Line 3, the electromagnetic imprint of that, and they merged it with a planet called Avion that was never meant to be what we were plugged into. It was a control matrix. It was a control planet that was run by some of the Vegans. And they not only took away the ascension capability, they put it into a total control. And that is why the Emerald Orpheum, who were the original ones, the original imprint that started the Turnician lineage, the post-imprint that Turnician lineage was seeded into. I'm sorry, I just lost track of myself. I just lost track of myself. I didn't want to do that. Anyway, I'll go back on where I was. When we got involved with these Vegan wars 669,000 years ago, we lost. All right, the light side lost. They lost control of the planetary grids. They lost control of what the races were doing as far as who's going to hybridize with who. And there were hybridization programs with the Anunnaki thrown into the Cloister races, which contaminated some of the Cloister races. Nothing like taking an amped up Cloister and then turning it to the dark side. Great. Now you have really powerful negative ones. And they did a lot of that during that period. That calmed down for a while. There was some climatic changes that happened just for natural reasons, because at certain times the planet kind of pulls itself around a little. It wasn't full pole shifts, but it was enough to create a situation where a lot of the races went underground. Some went in Earth, some literally just went into tunnel systems and underground, some left. It stabilized for a while between 669,000 years ago. That's when we first lost control. That's when we lost control of the planetary grid. And this is directly what we're correcting now. We're fulfilling what we tried to commit. The Emerald tried to commit 200,000 years ago to do the same thing, and we got flattened again. This time we're coming in to do it from how our hot water we're going to, because it has to be done, because this planet's not going to make it through another cycle if it isn't done. Okay? So when I talk about Iron Metallic, the most important thing to know about the Vegan wars 668,000 years ago was we lost the imprint of the Earth's Maharic shield on its core. It was disassociated, plugged into someone else that didn't belong to it. As long as that happens, the evolution of humans on this planet is going to be misaligned with what they are originally supposed to be. It will not be aligned with the Anahazi imprint, the Lyran imprint of the avatars. It'll be aligned with, instead, the ones who hijacked us, which means they will always be able to control and manipulate our consciousness. So, in setting back the pattern of our metallic into this grid, we're also setting back the proper coding that comes through the grid into the human DNA that will align your consciousness with your own ascension pattern rather than those who hijacked it. Okay? Now, we'll go to the next set of temple wars. These were called the Rama Wars, and they happened, let's say, about 247,511 years ago. They began in the inner region, or who's going to control the inner territories. We're having the same problem, dark versus light. Okay, I'll try to speed it up. I see people getting tired. Do you want me to rush this? Or do you want to
quick break?
Okay.
Break, it's the bathroom break or
yeah, because it's up to you. If you want to do the lecture at another time, I will do that.
No.
Okay. I left off after the first temple wars that happened 669,000 years ago. The next most important thing, and this is very important, because this is where something very special was created. I'll tell you about in a minute. The second set of temple wars occurred in 247,511 years ago. Okay, that involved the inner Earth groups that began to fight. The inner Earth Rama races had begun to fight, and it divided the stellar nations in relation to them. It also divided the surface cultures in relation to them. I could get down to who was on which side. Just
That's okay.
but that's okay. But yeah, that will just take up an awful lot of time. It basically created within the Rama races two divisions. One that still identify themselves as the Rama, and another that call themselves the Shambhali. The Shambhali aligned themselves with the Emerald Order Orpheum and were very supportive of the 12-strand pattern. Some of the Orpheum actually came in at that period to try to help the the Shambhali to defend themselves against the Ramas, and they were trying to defend the surface humans, the races, the cloister races that were coming, from being infiltrated and hybridized by the Ramas and by the Anunnaki stellar races. During that period, because it was all going crazy again, where everybody was fighting with each other, and it just keeps escalating and escalating until it gets to the point where somebody much higher has to intervene because the planet's going to get destroyed. Before it got to that point, there was a negotiation made called the Emerald Covenant, and that was taking both sides and getting them to agree to allow the human lineage to evolve to its 12-strand, but also allowing hybridization programs for the other Anunnaki and Raman-based races who are at this point getting what's called code convolution, where they're losing their ascension codes, their ability to evolve, because of their infiltration of the draconian avatar matrices. It was ripping down their coding progressively. So it was like, all right, stop fighting, you guys, for 2 seconds, long enough to see how we can face this problem for both of us. The Emerald Covenant was entered into by both sides. It involved a whole bunch of different races. It involved the Shambhali on one side and the Rama on the other. They agreed to not fight with each other. It involved the Elohim and also another group called the Seraphim, which were the ones involved with Vega, that originally had been Elohistic families that got involved with the Dark Avatar matrices and created another strain that they called Seraphim. Now the Saras that had helped us before were out of that lineage, but it crossed back over. So they were good guys. The Saras and the Seraphim are not the same thing. Okay. During the Rama Wars, when the Emerald Covenant was negotiated, some interesting things happened in the Elohai families, in the Emerald Order councils themselves. There was a group that really was more pro-Anunnaki evolution, even though they were, originally part of our side. This is where you've had a division form between the Guardian Alliance, who upheld and always will the Emerald Covenant to evolve humans to 12-strand, and then another group, they call themselves the Galactic Federation, who associated themselves more with, all right, we'll let humans evolve to a degree. We're more interested in evolving the cloister hybrid Anunnaki races. And you still have that division today. You can look on the websites and see some of the propaganda being put out by the Galactic Federation about where your forefathers are coming to rescue you and follow us. They have contact committees set up all over the planet. It's a real ET movement happening here. So this is where that division started, was 200,000 years ago. We all agreed that we would assist in the evolution of all of them. Once again, reconfirming that we're not just trying to evolve humans, we're trying to help everybody here. With the Emerald Covenant, a race called the Nephites was created. Now, in certain other people's material, they have talked about the Nephites and the return of the Nephites. The Nephites were a race strain that took cloister race, human races, from here, and combined them with the race from Tara, that originally was part of this race, but had got contaminated by Anunnaki. When we fell from Tara, or when our consciousness ended up down here, there were 2 divisions made in the Taranisian race strain. One was the Adami Kudmani, or the Adami races that we came out of. The other were the Beli Kudim. They were the ones who had been Taranisian, but had gotten involved with the Anunnaki and had draconian coding in them because of that. Right? The Nephite experiment was intended to bring in the rest of the human lineage, the Beli Kudim, and the Anunnaki races into hybridization, where they could get their flight codes back, where they could get their DNA, back into, up into the diamond codes. what happened during that experiment was it was being observed by the real dark avatar matrices that just don't want any of us to particularly evolve. All they're interested in is using us. They infiltrated some of the Nephite races by literally body snatching during the fetal integration process. When the soul of the incoming soul is trying to get into the body pattern, they would literally knock it out and put one of their own in. And they raised within the Nephite families a strain of pure draconian dark avatars that had high coding, and they could fit the D11 dark avatar. They became called Nephilim, and they have been giving us problems for ages. They invaded inner Earth, they got mixed up with Brahma races, they got involved with some from Sirius B and contaminated them, and they have been involved with certain cloister and root races here, where we've evolved something that wasn't supposed to be there at all, which was pure black sun DNA lines right within the human lineage itself. It was because of the Nephilim, which was the part of the Nephite experiment that went bad. Okay, these guys are coming back. I mean, there's some people in other teachings, they're saying, the return of the Nephites. Yes, they're coming back, which is like, all right, I'm kind of glad about that, as long as they're, as long as we know they're Nephites and not Nephilim at this point. It's also the return of the Nephilim. They're making their presence known, trying to get control of the Mentate. So these guys all started back in the period of the Rama Wars, the Temple Wars and the Rama Wars. A number of us were probably there. Okay, we have in our DNA, in our cellular memory, association with at least one of these periods of Temple Wars and with the cloister races. Because when the calling for this particular series of presentations was put out, it was put out for those who had that coding in them. Nobody else would respond. So you can rest assured that somewhere in there, this applies to you. Some of these periods apply to you, which can be helpful in trying to place your own incarnational history and your feeling tones as they come up, as you move through the drama that you're in now. All right. Now, with the Rama Wars, the negative side won again. They keep doing that, unfortunately. And that's why this time we're being very aggressive with our intervention. The light families tend to take a stance of non-intervention. They're not aggressive and pushy because they try to be fair to everybody. But it's like dealing with, an army who marches in perfect order with their little drummer in front and a bunch of snipers that just takes them out because they're hiding in the bushes and there's no rules to the, no rules to the board game. So being nice guys has not always been to the benefit of us, but it has allowed us to keep a level of consciousness that didn't turn us into them, where we didn't get as bad as they were, because that's not going to solve anything. But at this point, there have been times when Guardian Lines has been in major battles, they've been in stellar battles. They were a part of the Thousand Years Wars, which was Star Wars right over our heads. They were part of the Electric Wars that ended the first season. So they are not complete pacifists where they'll just let, reality systems get wiped out without defending them. Because when you're in polarity, sometimes it's necessary to do that. If you can get your consciousness out of polarity, you don't have to deal with that. That's what achieving Christ consciousness is about. Then you can blow yourself out of here and not deal with any of this nonsense anymore. But if you choose to come in as a helper, where you're here to put yourself into the polarity to help harmonize the drama, that's what a lot of us are here for, or because you're working on your polarity conflicts too, then you need to find a medium stance. You can just lay down and let people walk on you all the time, or you can learn an assertive stance, and that's what we're taking. Okay, what happened in the Rama Wars was the Nephilim got primary control. They started hybridizing with the races and really contaminating the race strains again, which is a setback for our goal of achieving 12 strands DNA. They also knew that in 210,216 years ago, that's when the Amenti Stargates were due to open again. And they wanted to make sure they had control of the planet when that happened, because they want to use the Stargates to infiltrate Mitaka Orion so they can go out into other time matrices. Okay. Well, in the last period, and they got control, and a lot of us went underground, or some of us were evac out, and just the races, part of those races was just evolved in other systems, because we were under dominion down here, negative dominion. It finally culminated again into another set of wars that occurred during the time when the Stargates opened, when they were due to open. It began a little bit before that, and about 211,000 years ago. That's when the big guns, the D11 avatars, decided to really show their force here, the Dark Ones. because they were hell-bent on getting control of Mente. And at that point, because so much higher level negative interference was being sent in, the light families also sent in major higher level interference to interfere with their program. The light forces decided this was the time for intervention. We'd already lost the pattern of Aramatana in the first set of temple wars, which stunted planet's evolution. And now they're just going to hybridize the races to the point where they're never going to reach a 12-strand evolution. So both of the big guns got involved on the Elohim families. You had the Elohai councils, the Orphi and the Emerald Order came in fleet. And we came in and we aligned with the Shambhali races and the Cloister races that were still, carrying loyalties to, the Emerald Covenant. We came in to defend the Emerald Covenant and to reset the pattern of Aramatana into the Earth grid. That's what we came in for, but we came in too late. And I was personally a part of that scenario, and I know there's a number of people in our group, in our extended group, that were also. We started to trip over those memories in January when we did some grid work on January 1st, and I just started seeing the movies running. I saw all the faces, and I couldn't imagine their names. So it was very moving. It was heartbreaking, really. It happened 216 years ago. We came in about 4 years earlier than that, and we're trying to secure the temple complexes because the light side had managed to have certain temples, complexes and fortified areas, and they had weapons that are like Star Wars compared to what we have. They had crystal weapons that were used through the temples for defense and that kind of stuff. We came in, and we also still had control over a good portion of the grid. We couldn't use the portals the right way because there was too much interference, but we needed to come in and hold the fort, and we tried. We aligned with the Brenno races, which were the Cloister races that had been the Atlanteans, and tried to protect their interests because they had stayed out of the Anunnaki interbreeding. And we came into their temples and tried to fortify them. And there were massive air raids coming, and there was also what is happening right now in our culture is what took us down. It wasn't the air raids that took us down. What took us down was for the 4 years that we were there, and for the years before that, they had used propaganda. The Nephilim looked like us. We all looked very similar to each other. And they came in with a song and dance line of, well, everybody's supposed to be unified. You can't take a stance against us or anything. We're trying to be part of, we're just trying to unify the races. If that were true, it would have been fine. But that was not what they were trying to do. They knew that through sexual union, they could progressively contaminate the codings of the light-coded races. So they seduced them continually. And they would seduce them physically, and they would seduce them in loyalties to the point where you didn't know good guys from bad guys or that there were really any bad guys. And meanwhile, they're trying to get control of the grids through the codings they're getting from you. This is what they were doing then. This is what they're doing again. They were doing body snatching right out from under people. They would get somebody with light codes to have a relationship with them and get them under mind control, and then allow one of theirs to essence displace, pop them out of body and put one of theirs in it. This is the stuff they were doing. They were setting people up, smiling in your face, telling you sweet stuff, and spouting unity consciousness. Well, at the same time, what they were doing was body snatching. And it was horrible to watch because it ripped apart the light races because it was so believable. And the light races wanted to believe that that's what was going to happen. Yes, unity, that's what we're all fighting for. That's what we're trying to do. So they believed them. So the people that were part of the Orphi and part of the Brenoi, they look at each other and they started to divide among themselves. The ones who were saying, oh, well, we should be nice to them. They're really not that bad. I don't think they mean harm. The others are saying, please don't. We know what they're trying to do here. We're not against them, but they're trying to take us down. It divided the light workers as well, which left huge vulnerabilities in the temple security systems. And that's what took us down. Finally, they got control. In a particular temple I was a part of in that incarnation, they infiltrated, and these were temple cities. They weren't just a few little pyramids. These were major pyramids, many of them step type, and they had areas where large crystals would be used. Like you'd see a crystal sticking out the top of it, it went all the way down to the earth, huge. We we were invaded, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands, armies of hundreds of thousands. We had fortification of hundreds of thousands. They invaded our temples because people let them in, because they decided to trust them. And the inner council, watching all of it happening, oh no, we're in trouble. By the time it became obvious we were in trouble, it was too late, and they had taken aggressive military control of the temples because they wanted the crystalline technologies we had to control the stargates. We had control of the stargates. The Emerald Order has the security contract and always has since the beginning of Amente when it was set up. We always were responsible for the security. That was the only way we got permission to do the Amente Stargate thing because it was such a risk to the Mintaka portals. We had to be responsible for making sure those portals did not get invaded. And they came in and they would have gained full control over the stargates, and they would have accessed Mintaka. We were trapped here, and this was like major. There were places that are now in Florida that were involved. There are places in Egypt that are involved. There are places in Peru that are involved. In China, like the lands of China, there were temples all over the place, and it was a massive attack. This is like a global war type thing. We had to destroy our own temples, and we couldn't get a lot of our own people out. It was either the Earth grids go and Mintaka gets taken over, or we have to sacrifice ourselves. And it came down to we'd get as many of us out as we could. They were evacuating all over the place, but it was all happening so fast. We had one more seal to release. Now we're releasing seals on the halls of Mente. Now these are the security seals that we were responsible then and now for releasing. If you don't release them, the whole thing goes in a pull tilt, cleans itself off. Okay, it's a restart system. It's part of the security system. That if the ones who hold the key codes aren't here, there's something wrong. And it shuts down, so nothing else can invade the portals to Mintaka. Alright, that's what we're facing this time as well. But in that time, there was one more seal to release. And they were going after the person whose body was keyed to that seal. If they got it, they would have taken Mintaka. And the Syrian Council sent in the air raids, and they flattened the temples. They nuked them, they blew them up. It's not exactly nuclear, it's a crystal-based technology, but it kind of works like that. Many of us were trapped, and many of you may feel a resonance to this because I think a lot of you were there in some context. And it was just like the final hours, you knew Fleet was coming, and you knew that you loved them, they loved you, and they couldn't get you out in time. You were stuck there. You were stuck in the temples. You tried to get out of the temples, the Nephilim would get you. They'd kill you there. And that's worse because they torture you and they had like mind control things to read your memory matrix. And so if they got you, you had to be dead. They couldn't do it if you were dead. So they would torture you and to get your memory matrix out, turn you into a total vegetable. So it was like the lesser of the evils was getting blown up actually. In those times, that has affected us tremendously here because we didn't get to reset the grids. They got control again over the planetary grids itself. It was set under what's called a 10-code pulse, which means the 8th and 12th dimensional frequency bands were literally blocked out of the planetary grid, which means the consciousness on it could not plug in their 8th and 12th strands. They made it so we operated like they did because we couldn't access our own strand imprints. And it got worse from there. So this was a big period of time. And I think for this group, it was a big period of time because I think a lot of you were part of those days. After that, there were progressive, right after the temples were exploded, because the final seal was not released, the clearance seal was not released, it went into shift. And a lot of the negative ones went to inner Earth or got evac'd out. We got as many of our guys out as we could and down to inner Earth. But it went into full pole shift. And it wasn't full reversal, but it was a shift. And after that, there was something that has to do with solar frequencies, that there's certain things that they align the wrong way. Look at the magnetic fields between Earth and the Sun. It's called a red pulse. It's a D1 frequency burst that gets transmitted from the Sun that literally vaporizes anything that's white on Earth. There's nothing that can sustain that vibration. We were hit with a red pulse here, but everybody was wiped out from tidal waves and stuff anyway, so it didn't matter. But it was, here we go again, restart. The ones that didn't escape were flattened. And eventually there will be things found. that can just as easily confirm this history as not. You know what I mean? Archaeology is like funny science. So, well, we think it's this. That's the key word, think. Okay, everything is an interpretation in archaeology. So eventually they will find, and they already have some stuff that would support this, but they're interpreting it differently. Okay. Now, after this period, we got into a period where the Nephilim and the negative ones were fully under control here, and anybody left from the good side that came up from the inner or whatever, they were just hiding. They lived in underground tunnel systems. They hid from them. And we got very lucky because we got visitors from the Orion system called the Zephelium, which were the original race strain of what's now the Zetas, those sticky little gray things. Only some of them are icky, depends on their agenda. But the Zephelium brought with them organisms from their systems. They weren't originally Zeta Reticuli either. They were originally out of the Orion Bellatrix area. And they brought here plagues that only affected the reptilian races. It was beautiful, karmic justice for once. They brought in certain organisms that over generations began to create a weakness to exposure to sun. In the reptilian strains, it did not affect the regular cloister strains. The more reptilian gene codes you had, the more susceptible to these diseases you had, because they were, like accelerated by the sun. This is where our stupid vampire legends come from. There were groups of them who were literally going into, decomposition, cancer type things, because of this viral thing that was brought here by their own kind. And they went underground, and they found that, and this is where you get the blood drinking legends, they found that by consuming the blood of diamond suns, they could temporarily give themselves some immunity to sun, where they could get on the surface and do things. But they lived underground, and they fed on the blood of things that had the diamond sun coating. And because they didn't have the little DNA monitors to go around and check them out, they just go for whatever they could. They go for certain race populations that they knew were concentrated light guys, and they would go after them. So that's where our legends are coming from. There's a lot more to our mythology than we realize. All right, so let's see. The period of the plagues was about 200,000, 200 years ago, and it lasted until about 150,000 years ago. All right. Oh, by the way, they called the ones that they didn't call them vampires. They called them necromaton. They were called the necromaton. And it's these guys that are behind the stuff, the teachings of like necromancy and all of this kind of stuff that has surfaced. These guys got involved with Rama races, and got involved with the Syrian blue races that decided they hated humans, and they started this real underground movement of the black magical teachings and that kind of stuff. Plug you right into their matrix so they can feed off your kundalini and use you for the purposes. Okay, now, get past that. What am I doing? Okay. Anyway, I'm going to bring it up real fast from the root races because I don't have to tell you when or who they were. That's in the book. Okay? After we got through that period of the plagues, the light side got some control over surface because so many of the reptilian strains could not tolerate exposure to the sun. They had to go do hybridization stuff, and most of them went to the inner earth. Some of them were evac down. We got some control over the territories of Earth. We got to the point where we could reseed or seed the third seeding, finally get around to it. We put in the cloister races and then their root races, and that began about 75,000 years ago. That's when the first series of cloister and root started to come in together. This is where we started to come into the picture, or like this particular time frame's race line come into the picture. I have all the dates on which ones were entered where and when. They're in the book, so I don't need to go through that right now. Let's see. Then there was a bunch of different wars that continued to happen with the Anunnaki from Sirius B, from Nibiru, the Ramas from Inner Earth. It was constantly these groups of people, okay, fighting. This is where the temples that we're looking at out here came into the picture. These were originally created by Syrian Council and their races. They were created by the Saris Egyptians and actually the Hebrews that were working with them at the time, and the Anu Melchizedeks, who had been seated in here as per the Treaty of Al-Anu that we had agreed on to stop the war that ended the last seating. So they had built the first pyramids. They weren't built for fun. They weren't built for tombs. They were built to show as a show of force, because the Anunnaki were starting to invade the Melchizedek race strains. They get in control of Atlantis. Atlantis had evolved and was a continent at that point. And it's over. It is where they say, like in the Atlantic Ocean, there was a continent that extended out. And the negative ones were again building up their strength. And the Syrian Council came in to make a show of strength. They built the Sphinx and the original pyramid. Let me get the dates on this. The first ones were built in 46,459 BC. That was the first time those two sites were built on in this generation. Okay, the ones there are not from that period. These were wiped out, and they were rebuilt, and then they were wiped out, and they were rebuilt a third time. So what you're seeing there is the third rebuilding of those pyramids, plus a lot of other stuff tacked onto it after that. So the first time that they were built, this is Cheops and the Sphinx. They were built specifically. Cheops is positioned almost dead center on the fourth planetary vortex that leads to, it's the main doorway to the fourth dimensional frequencies, to harmonic 2. That's where they all come in. It was built as a protection thing. It marked that vortex, and it marked Syrian power on that vortex, the light Syrians power on that vortex. And it was on our behalf, on the human lineage behalf, that they were built. The Sphinx was built directly over the main inner Earth portal. That's what's under there. Everybody's looking for Hall's records and things like that. What's the big thing about the Sphinx is it's the marker and the protector of the inner Earth portals. One of the main ones that goes from this area down into the frequency modulation zone that takes you into the inner Earth territories. One of the main ones the Lama kept coming up and invading through. So they sealed the portals to the light codes, and these were fortification stations. Now, the pyramid was more than a fortification station. It had been, in its first building, a teleport. It was aligned with, I believe it was Sears B at that point, so they could have almost instantaneous fleet intervention. It was meant to show, we're not going to have you guys push around anymore. You're not going to push us around anymore. They could immediately align with Sears B through the pyramid, and they could come in. It worked as a harmonic resonance chamber, and they could open local portals. I won't call them stargates, because stargates are the full vertical lineup, and they only open on cycles. But portals, you can open at different times. They're like horizontal and diagonal, and stargates are vertical. They could open up the portals, and they could get here fast. And it worked. It worked very well. The reason it was designed, the Sphinx was originally the face of a lion. And it was a lion because the Anunnaki that had decided to stay with Council, that wanted help from Council, got help from a race called the Leonites. And I believe they're called the Araga. It's a strange sounding name, so we just call them the Leonites. And they look like cat people, and they're from harmonic 3, etheric matter density. And they intervened and they helped the Anunnaki who wanted help to evolve. This is where you get Hathor. The Hathors got involved. There's another race that brought in, that's not exactly cow, but that's where that affiliation came from. So the Hathor is actually part cow, part cat, part Anunnaki, and part human. All right, that's what the Hathor god is. It's a race, and the Sphinx was not meant to honor the Hathor in particular, but the race that made all of that possible, that was trying to bring the races together, which were the Leonites, and the Anunnaki that helped to build these temples. And they did. They were Syrian Anunnaki, but they were Syrian Council Anunnaki that set the foundation. They gave plans. This is an Anunnaki design as far as the temples go. And they taught the Egyptians how to do it, and they built them together. So the first time they were built as a show of power on the light side, saying, we've had enough. Then we got into, the first crawl of the pyramids. Okay, the pyramids got in trouble when Atlantis got in trouble. In 28,000 BC, there were some problems with the Anunnaki bringing in the Draco strains to try to infiltrate, and they lost control over them. The Dracos started taking them over and everybody else. So everybody decided we had to get the Dracos out of here. They decided to use the power generator crystals. They had those power generator crystals from the time when they first seen the races here and everybody was starting to try to get along. They tried to use the power generator crystals to block in certain areas of the underground tunnels to contain the Dracos until they could be evac'd out by forcefully evac'd out by the good guys, and the crystals blew. They blew the grids. What happened with that? Now before this, I won't even go into this, but Lemuria fell before that. All right, and that was another one that wasn't exactly done on purpose. It was a stupid accident, and they literally decimated Lemuria. It was like 52,000 years ago, I believe. But we'll bring it up because I'm trying to get to the...
What happened?
We lost power. Maybe something to do with the locks that we would, oh no, it's probably.
It did that the other night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Not that
did.
long.
Yeah, it did. And the girl-
That's a punctuation.
Yeah, yeah.
Signal.
But he you know what he gave us that needed poof?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Were
it's
we?
right. Yeah.
So you were saying the
What was
crystals
all that
blew,
good?
you're
Yeah.
I didn't do that. Gee, that was good.
Yeah.
Do it again, huh?
Maybe I thought it. We were talking to her earlier. All right. Anyway, as far as these pyramids go, music.
Huh?
No, not music. No,
Yeah,
just
there's music,
you
right?
have to live.
Here's one of your music on the soundtrack of the
It's gonna be
video.
on this night, Thursday.
Okay. Anyway, 28,000 BC, Atlantis blew up into 3 islands. All that was left of the continent were 3 islands. And it remained an island nation, but we also went into pole shift again. When we go into pole shift, it misaligns the pyramids that are aligned to special things. And the pyramids out here, where they were stationed out here, no longer were aligned with Sirius B. So here we go again, we're vulnerable again. They have to take the long way in to get here if the Anunnaki try to do anything. And the Anunnaki are coming up with the Ramas from inner Earth, they're already here. So it's not like they had to take the long way, and they were already here. Let's see, so that knocked it out, and that also was where Atlantis did its first fall. Let's see, I'm trying to go through this as fast as I can. Let's see. Just go. Now, let's see. The pyramids were not fully destroyed during that, the original pyramids, but they were heavily damaged. They had to be rebuilt after that. But they were still using, these pyramids were originally built, I hate to tell Mr. Hawass, he's right about the last building of the pyramids. They were built manually. But the first 2 buildings of these pyramids, they were built with the Ankhs. The Ankhs were huge power generators. They took them out of here when they took the crystals out of here. Now I just have the little ones left in the shape of them. They don't work anymore. They were machines. They could bend electromagnetism interdimensionally, and they could cut through rock like butter, and they could levitate rock. And that's how they were originally built. And that's how the calculations that were done with these things were far beyond what our science and mathematicians can do. These pyramids were a lot nicer than the ones that are out there now. So the original ones were built rather quickly because they had advanced technology at that point. Let's see. Okay. Period. Here's another period that's a major problem in what has happened with our gene codes. 22,236 BC. This is called the Lucifer Rebellion period. This is when the bunch of them have been involved with the Hebrew races from the Palladian system and the Avianites that we talked about before in the Vegan system. They all decided to be buddies, and they formed, and the Bellicudium that used to be part of our race, and the Galactic Federation that used to be part of the Guardian Alliance, they decided to take the whole thing in their own direction. They were going to hijack human evolution and amp up Anunnaki hybridization, but higher-coded Anunnaki. They hated the Draconians. They were not into that Anunnaki matrix. They created a middle ground, a gray zone in between, and they messed with their gene codes totally. We ended up with something called the Palladian seal, which is something that blocks the DNA from working the right way, and it's something that we're using cathartic healing to clear. So they got involved. That was a major issue, again, in our history and what we're trying to deal with, because they're back. They're the ones behind the Galactic Federation stuff that's coming out now with the channels. They're behind a number of other things. They're behind what we call the fake Michael matrix. There's a lot of angelic contact happening these days, and nobody asks, what is an angel? Where do you come from? What are your references? They really should ask these questions, because one of the things that this group responsible for the Lucifer Rebellion is doing, they're still trying to do their old agenda. They're still trying to hijack human evolution, and they're using our religious stories to do it. They're saying, oh, I'm Angel Michael, I'm Angel Gabriel, I'm Emmanuel, I'm whoever. Now, there are legitimate Michaels and Gabriels and these guys, but these guys are using the names and pretending that they are those, and they're plugging people right into their matrices, and people are going, oh, isn't this wonderful? It's happening again, just like it did 200,000 years ago, with people saying, sure, take me, because they don't know the difference. Okay? Now, let's see, there's a lot of things. If I try to cover this, we'll be until 6 o'clock in the morning, so I won't do that. I want to get back. I'm going to focus on just the temples, okay, out here, since we've been studying what they are. Let's see. They were rebuilt, I believe, rapidly after things stabilized from the pole shift, the first pole shift that happened with the first Atlantean mess. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I have the dates here. Semperles is when they were rebuilt that time. They've been around 10,500. Yeah, around 10,500 BC. They were reconstructed again. They were functional again. This time they were aligned with Alcyone in the Palladian system. It was closer because of the way the axis tilted on the planet. So again, it was used as a teleport station. And that was all fine and dandy until 9,558 BC, when the Atlanteans did it again, and they attempted to take over the inner Earth portal, the one under the Sphinx, because they wanted access to the Ark of the Covenant, because the Ark of the Covenant was actually a portal bridge between Earth core, the halls of Amente, and a system in Andromeda, and it ran all the way up to the dimensional scale. If it was opened the right way, you could draw fifth dimensional frequency out and charge objects with it. This was free power, okay, very high power, free energy, and you could control all sorts of things with it. They wanted to set up their own little civilizations free from the grids that the Syrian Council controlled with the crystals that the Syrian Council had given. So they were trying to find their own way to take power, but they had to take control of the inner Earth portal and get control of the Ark of the Covenant. So again, this is the time they tried to blast, using the crystals, they got control of the Atlantean crystals, tried to blast into the Ark of the Covenant to open it, and it backfired. There's too many seals in the Ark of the Covenant, you can't do that. And it backlogged the signals and blew their whole grids all the way back and caused chain reaction, with their crystal generators. At that point, we lost a lot of friends on our side as far as the Guardian Alliance, but all right, we're sick of this already. A lot of them went over to the let's repress human evolution thing, because this is getting ridiculous down here. What happened then was they blew Atlantis completely. The 3 islands were no more. They went under. There was a lot of damage done. We had another slight pole shift. And when you have the pole shifts, you usually end up with major flooding and sometimes rapid freeze, that kind of stuff. And then it all has to rebalance itself. And everybody goes scurrying, either get evac'd out or go down under, but it's get off the surface fast. Right. And this has happened numerous times, and this was the last time that this happened. It was like 9,558 BC. That's when Atlantis finally officially sank, the whole thing. That's when Council came in and pulled all the crystals and took all the Ankhs and shut it all down and said, this is ridiculous. They also had to, the Ark of the Seal and the Ark of the Covenant was damaged, which would have caused, because of certain ways that Amente works, also Amente, it would have caused, I want to get everybody a good tape that doesn't stay around here. Always distracts me. Where did I leave off?
This would have caused.
Just what it caused. What was it caused? Can anybody backtrack me? I hate when that happens. When I get distracted, it breaks my train.
Seal of the Ark was damaged.
We're talking about the Ark and everything.
The seals.
Oh yeah, okay, this is where quarantine came in. Not only did we lose the power stuff, the technology that was taken out, not only did we lose the alignment of the pyramids that were there, but because the Ark of the Covenant was damaged, they had to block out certain frequencies. The good guys had to block out certain frequencies in the Earth grid to keep certain energies from coming in here that the Earth was not ready to handle, that would have made it explode. So that created what's called a frequency fence. A frequency fence is literally a frequency barrier. It's a block in frequency that will register in the DNA and anything on the planet, first of all. So it created a block, another block in our DNA as far as integrating our consciousness. It also kind of freeze-framed us in time. Our perception of anything of the higher dimensions was not able to happen while that frequency fence was up. It also created very much difficulty in visitation for any of the good guys or the bad guys, because every time something came through the frequency fence, there was a chance that it would throw the frequency fence, and if it dropped the frequency fence, the planet would explode because of these frequencies that would come down through the Ark of the Covenant. So we went into a period of quarantine, literally. They call it the 11-11-12-12 frequency fence. In the New Age movement, you hear a lot of these people like Solara and those kind of people talking about 11-11-12-12, the magnetic codes. What are these? We just had that recently lifted, finally. And the dates are in the book, I forget, it was like the early 90s. They just started to fix that part of the grid and release that frequency fence the first time they could. So all of these things have directly and progressively affected us. Now, I'll get back to the pyramids again, so we have a little bit more to say on those. Up to Atlantis sinking, after rebuilding the second time. It's hard to go through this fast. It's easy to slowly walk you all through it, but I'm not able to do that right now. I'll be here forever. The last time the pyramids were built, were set up. Now again, during this time, they were flattened. They had to be reconstructed after the final fall of Atlantis in 9,958 BC, whatever it was. Okay, third time that they were rebuilt was not until 5,546 BC. This time they had to be rebuilt manually. And this time there was a lot of other problems of getting the grid stabilized, having to get the cultures back up and restart them, went back to being primitive. But this time there was no power source like there was before. A lot of things were lost. It went back to food, basic survival issues. So it took the culture a long, long time this time to get itself back together. In the meantime, we're still getting some of the manipulation primarily from the inner Earth Rama races, because they didn't have to go through the frequency fence. They were kind of underneath it and inside of it. We evolved very slow from that point. We ended up with Sumerian culture, which was primarily out of that middle matrix Galactic Federation bunch from Nibiru and the Pleiades. That was primarily theirs. And from there, they infiltrated what was left of the Egyptian cultures that had come back up. The Ceres Egyptian lines that originally had been, purified lines, ended up getting hybridized with the Rama races and with the experiment from the Pleiades with that Hebrew group, and totally changed the coding. We ended up with primarily Anunnaki influence here. The temples ended up under their control once they were rebuilt. And the whole culture that we look, when we look at the cultures that have emerged out of here, were primarily Anunnaki. They were either the Anunnaki that were coming up through the association of the Anunnaki cloister races of inner Earth that were in association with the Ramas, or they were the ones coming out of the Nibiru matrix that were dealing with the Hebrew and the Hebrew-Egyptian lines that were trying to hijack the evolution. There were very, very few families of Diamond Sun codes or any Emerald Order left, except with a small group of Shambhala in the inner Earth territories who have held their ground for many, many, many generations. It's been a real mess here. When we go to see these beautiful temples, we are, and a lot of the gods they worshipped. And there are certain periods. This is going to be in the book Return of the Emerald Order. I'm going to get the different periods in the Pharaonic history. The Pharaonic history was fighting constantly. Which group? You had the 3 DNA matrices represented at this point. You had the Black Suns, the Belil Suns, which were half and half, and they went with the Palladian, Nibiru, Egyptian. And then you had the Diamond Suns trying to somehow survive this mess. Depending on the gods that were being worshipped at the time, you can tell certain things about them. Now, some of the gods that were worshipped, the gods they're worshipping are the ones, the visitors that had come in. They had, in ancient times, they had direct interaction with him. There is a person named Thoth. There is a person. Well, Hathor was not so much a person. That was representative of a race. But ones like Thoth and Enoch and these guys, these were guys that had bodies that came down here and visited physically. And they left their legends and their teachings behind. And they were worshipped. They're from Harmonic 2. Most of them are from Nibiru. Some of them were on our side, or came over to our side after a while and said, this isn't working. I think we like your Guardian Line stuff better. We'll work with you. We're basically affiliated with the Isis, Osiris, and before it got corrupted, some of them were using it in the wrong way. But originally, the Isis, Osiris, Horus, Hathor, and Anubis concept. Those Egyptian gods were the ones associated with the Diamond Sun or the Emerald Order matrices. And that's why when you go to some of these temples, you'll feel better than if you go into primarily Anunnaki temples. This is why when we're going into temples now to recode the grids, every time we run our Maharaj shield, we are setting a piece of the D12 pattern back in. We're setting a piece of Paramatana back into the Earth's grids. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And it's helping to activate our Kundalini in our process, but it's also helping the Earth grid to heal. Okay, so that kind of, does that give you a roundup of what led us to this point? I know you're all getting really tired, but is that enough to bring it into focus? That's what I wanted to do for this trip. Okay. All right. Did you enjoy learning of the history? I know it's late. We're better tomorrow noon. But at least it gives you a primary framework to use. So we know who our friends are. We have the Shambhali of Inner Earth. We have the Guardian Alliance and those affiliated with the Guardian Alliance who are coming from all sorts of different systems. They're Elohim, but they call themselves Elohai to make the distinction between the Elohim who fell. And we are working with all of the groups, and we'll help to host Matrix, any of the others that want to come over into the positive agendas. And then you have the ones that are based out of the Draconian matrices of the Orion system, a lot of which work through the Rama races of Inner Earth and the Anunnaki that are definitely on the very dark side. And then you have those middle guys who just constantly mess everything up and leave the door open for the dark guys to come in. And you have those across the board, but they're manifesting themselves mainly right now through the Galactic Federation stuff coming through the channel, the ET contact, and through the Michael matrices, and through several other teachers like me that are very, very popular, who I won't get into because I'm not here to point fingers. But they're very active in influencing groups of people right now, these three groups. Just wanted you to be aware of it and the history behind it. So I hope that's enough, and I'll let you all go to sleep. Thank you for staying. Thank you. To most people, because it's a very ancient concept. It's not more. It's more than a concept. It's the name that was given to a soul family. We call it a soul family for simplification. It's much more than just a soul, because when you study our program, you know that the soul is only the next level up of dimensions 4, 5, and 6. It is a collective of consciousness that is connected to the highest levels of creation. That in our system, see, I have to modulate between the people who have studied more of our structure of identity in the dimensional framework and those who are just coming into that. So, bear with me as I try to give enough information to the ones who don't have it and not bore the ones who do have it to death. Okay. The keepers of the flame are a security team in certain ways that are sent in and choose to come in from higher levels of creation. And they come in many places, not just to the Earth system. They come into various reality systems within the 5 harmonic universes in order to, at different times, stimulate the evolution of the races involved in those systems into their higher evolution, into their own path of moving into higher evolution. When consciousness comes into manifestation, it chooses a path of dimensionalization, which means it chooses to fragment itself into different configurations that allow different levels of individuality to occur, individuation progressively. First, we go through 3 levels of separation from the collective consciousness of Source, and we go into the 3 levels of ascended mastery that I sometimes talk about. They're expansive levels of consciousness that cannot be contained in form, and they are ever present and eternal. We all are connected to a level of that kind of consciousness. You can view it as our cosmic family of consciousness. We would be one manifest aspect of that cosmic family of consciousness. Now, as consciousness continues its journey, it goes into dimensionalization, and it goes into the 15-dimensional structure. There are more than one set of 15 dimensions in the universe. There are infinite sets of them, but they come in packages of 15 dimensions to form a time matrix. A time matrix is a dimensionalized structure that allows for space, time, and matter to be experienced. So more individuation, but also the experience of linear progression through time can be experienced as an experiment by consciousness. We all got into this game as an experiment of consciousness, something to do to learn things, to experience new things. It was an experience in polarity, in dividing portions of the consciousness up in one way and other portions in another, and having them relate to each other in various ways. And that means various different things on different levels. You have your physics level of it. It can be translated into physics. You also have your gender level. It translates into gender with male and female. It also translates into forces of dark and light and those in between. All right? All of it is part of a collective. And this is what I want to... I know most of you understand it, but if some of you don't know where I'm coming from, I would like people to understand that even though I talk about dark sides and light sides and I talk about polarity, does not mean I'm coming from polarity consciousness. It means I'm teaching about and identifying what polarity consciousness is. Other people, especially those that come in without walking through this with me first, misinterpret where I'm coming from, because they think I'm talking about she always talks about the negative. No, I don't always talk about the negative. I talk about both sides, but a lot of people think that if you talk about the negative at all, that you're negative. I'm not coming from a negative space at all. We are all a part of the one consciousness that chose to experience itself in individual parts. When I talk about negative energies or intruder races or this kind of stuff, they are not outside of that oneness. They are a part of the same thing we are a part of. They are a part of us and we are a part of them on the higher levels. When we're dealing with ourselves, we will have polarity while we're in dimensionalization. That's how dimensionalization is created. It requires polarity to arrange consciousness in that way. So you will have, even within the self, a lighter side and a darker side. The darker side is not evil. Evil is a very old word applied to things that are lower in frequency as opposed to things that are higher in frequency. It can be very simply understood, and the old battle concept can be upgraded and evolved if we understand things in terms of the physics where this comes in. If we understand it's all energy and it's all frequencies. We have higher and lower frequencies. One is not any more valuable or better than the other. They are both equally a part of the same unified field system, just as both the dark and light forces are. So when I talk about dark forces and things like that, I am not talking about something or expecting you to position yourself against it. Not at all. When polarity translates into human form and into the human drama, or even into the matter form dramas, you end up with people, races, playing both sides of the game. Some will hold lower frequencies of consciousness, some will hold higher frequencies of consciousness. Ideally, they progressively learn to blend and progressively move up and hold higher and higher frequencies until they expand back into the oneness that they were. In the time matrix system that we're in, just like in all of the time matrix systems that are exploring this polarity drama, there were certain things that weren't exactly part of the original plan, certain twists that went a little too far, and it really amplified the polarity consciousness in our time matrix. It created like really dark sides and really light sides and a lot of really weird space in between, where certain consciousness, once it's down here, doesn't know which side to go on because they don't even understand the sides. We're in a drama like that. That drama manifests here on Earth. It manifests in harmonic 2 in the semi-etheric matter density races. It manifests in harmonic universe 3 in the etheric matter density races, and even in harmonic universe 4, where we have pre-matter states of being, but they're still states of consciousness that are pre-matter liquid light. So you have this polarity issue and this amplified one in our time matrix all the way up until you get to the 5th harmonic. That's where unity starts to begin. You start with the 12th dimension and then it moves into the 13th. You start to go mend those polarities and bring them back together. So when you go into those systems, which are really back into consciousness expanding into waveform, it's not even in form or linear time anymore, that's when you really start to hit the unity consciousness where you don't have polarity dramas like we're dealing with here. While we're in a polarity drama, it's important to identify that you are in one, because then you can understand how to position your own energy field in relation to it. And depending on what your objectives are will depend on how you want to position yourself. If your objective is to expand through the levels of dimensionalization and reclaim the parts of yourself that are there, to expand out of the time matrix and back into wholeness of your ascended master levels, then there are certain things that will get you there and certain things that will not. So therefore, the things that will get you there, if that's your objective, are the things you want to do, and the other things we would suggest you avoid doing. So when we're in the dramas with these negative energies, positive energies, the negative ones, in what we're calling negative, are not bad. They're simply ones that are not going to give you the objective of attaining your own levels of mastery. They won't get you out of the time matrix, they'll get you stuck in the time matrix. If that's your objective, by all means follow them. It's fine. Nobody's judging you. You will just simply experience the reality of your choices. So as long as you understand that we're coming from a perspective of unity, just simply identifying the rules and parts of the game, you might understand that I do come from a very lighthearted place with it. I'm not coming from a negative place or an anti-this, anti-that place. It's all about the agenda. Most people that are interested in these teachings at all are people who want to expand themselves. They want to get mastery over themselves in time and then expand beyond that into their fullness and their wholeness. Therefore, there are certain energies they are better off doing without than with. Certain energies have the desire, because of their own states of evolution, to manipulate other energies. You'll get to a certain level where you do not want to manipulate anyone. You believe fully in freedom for all beings, even if they're making bad choices, even if they're harming others, where you realize they have a right to be what they are. This is the place I come from with all of this. There are beings in this universe, even in the higher harmonics, that do not realize this yet. They still inflict their will on other beings. Because there are these levels, these higher levels that we're all connected to of ascended mastery, there are portions of all of ourselves that care enough about the portions down here that realize if you let everybody be stuck forever, no growth can occur, no expansion can occur. So they will intervene, and they try to direct both sides back into harmonious interaction. When you get into the ascended masters levels, you're dealing with collectives of consciousness. And this, I wanted to give you this frame before I start talking about the Orion and the keepers of the flame. The eternal flame that they're the keepers of is the full expansion back into waveform. It would appear as a spherical sun of energy if it were to be perceived from the lower dimensional frequencies. It is the life flame, the life force, the consciousness force. Now, the keepers of that consciousness force, every being is a keeper of some of it, but the keepers of the flame are those who made choices from the ascended masters levels on down through all of their levels of identity to protect the ability of all things in the time matrix to re-evolve if they so happen to run into trouble when they get in the time matrix. When you get into time, it's very easy to get your consciousness caught up in distortions, and particularly in this time matrix, because there's been some major distortions on higher levels up in harmonic 4, it can be very, very confusing. You can get yourself trapped in time where you really forget how to get back out. And that's not good for anybody. Now, if you set a master level of your own consciousness, because it has part of itself stuck down there, and it's not good for you because you become very frustrated and progressively more tired as a being as you're in here. And you can literally lose your connection to your ascended master levels and become finite as the form of consciousness that you're in. You can never become finite and disappear. Energy just changes form. It's not created or destroyed, always was, always will be. You always will be and always were. But the form you take can change. The ideal in evolution is to maintain the form that you're in and expand it, which means expanding your memory of who you are. If you lose your connection to Source, you do not lose your affiliation with Source. You are still composed of the consciousness of Source. You will simply lose the coherence between the particles of your consciousness, if you want to put it that way. If you go back to space dust is still consciousness. It's particles of the consciousness of Source, or the collective that we call God. So you can't get lost, but you can lose yourself, where you're no longer sentient and aware and focused as a being. You lose track of who you might have been, what other forms you had. What we're trying to evolve into when we say we want to evolve and re-expand back into what we were is maintaining all of our parts and the memory thereof, so when we fully expand back into the oneness, we have full memory of the journey we had. We learn that way, we grow that way, we become conscious co-creators that way, and it gives us more freedom and more self-expression than a unit of space dust will have. A unit of space dust gets acted upon by other more developed consciousness. We can choose to be something that's acted upon or something that is acting to direct, things like space dust or other things. Now, with the Keepers of the Flame, they have a commitment to maintaining the mechanics of energy, the physics that work in a dimensional system. So beings can maintain and have available the electromagnetic scalar coding physics that will allow them to stay connected to Source and allow them to progressively expand back into their own highest levels. It is a commitment to keep the doorway open for all races. The Keepers of the Flame manifest in many systems. The ones who manifest here were first involved with Tara before they were involved with Earth. They were involved with Tara in Harmonic 2, or its counterpart in Harmonic 2, way before the human form as we know it was even created. So they were a consciousness collective, and they've taken many, many forms in many different races, stellar races, human races. But they were committed to the evolution of the life forms in the area they were put into. They were beyond polarity consciousness themselves. They already learned. They'd already gone through their dramas and learned those lessons. And they chose to come back repeatedly as teachers. They would put themselves back in the polarity dramas and have to experience some of it in order to bring in a higher level of information and cognition. Now, the Keepers of the Flame that are involved with this system come through a specific family lineup. As I said, we have families of consciousness. We're here, we have a soul family, then an oversoul family, an avatar family, a rishi family. That takes us into the dimensional structure. Then when we get out of the dimensional structure, we have an entity that we're all a part of, which is a larger collective. Then we have a rishi, which is a larger collective. And we have an ekar, which is a larger collective, and a god seed, which is a huge collective. They're like cosmic families of consciousness. All right, the Melchizedeks represent the god seed level of things that were created in this particular time matrix. Everything in this time matrix is connected to that cosmic family. They don't have to acknowledge it. They don't have to use the word Melchizedek. Melchizedek is simply a tonal signature. It's a sound tone signature of energy that represents the core signature of energy that all things came into this time matrix on. So whether or not you choose to be a Melchizedek, we all are one. We just choose to, in the Melchizedek cloister, we just choose to acknowledge that on a conscious level. It doesn't matter if you ever do. You're still connected to a god seed. If you want to call it Joe, you're welcome to. It doesn't matter. Okay? Now, with the Melchizedek cloister, I'm going to show you. I'm actually ashamed of this diagram because I usually have very nice diagrams that I typeset and make very perfect and drive myself crazy with. This is just a simple structure that is really messy when I do it with a pen. Many of you might have seen this, okay? You don't have to read the words, I'll explain them. Simply get the concept, kind of like the onion skin thing, of levels within levels within levels, spheres within spheres within spheres. That's how our identity is structured. That's how our cosmic families are structured, coming all the way down to our personal self. You'll have the collective all is out here, let's say, with no boundaries, no borders. Then you'll have the first individuation, which is the God seed level, then the ekar level, then the rishi level, the entity level. Then in here you have the time matrix with its dimensionalized levels. In each level, there is an aspect of consciousness that can be identified. And with the keepers, I just want to show you their basic lineage. So you'll understand when I talk about terms like Orifeme and things like this, you'll know what I'm talking about. Because right now they're just terms that kind of hang there and they're not connected to anything, you know, when I use them. So people guys are like, well, okay, it's something. Whatever it is, sounds good, okay. This shows a family lineup coming down from what we call the God seed level, for lack of a better translation in English. It's the God seed level, first individuation level, first cosmic family of consciousness. In our time matrix, that would be considered the Melchizedek tonal signature. Now, the Melchizedek tonal signature makes many, 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 many different families on the next level. The next level is the ekar level, and there are many, many, countless numbers of manifestations of Melchizedek in that level in relation to our lineage and what's happening with the Turanisium race, which is our core race, the human race. The next level down was an entity, or actually an ekar, called Ra. All right, it was another tonal signature. Names are simply tones that translate into scalar patterns. So it is a way to identify a scalar wave signature. That's what the language is, too. It's built on scalar signatures, but that's very complex, and we won't get into it in our discussion. Okay, so we come from Melchizedek down to Ra. Ra makes many, many different families on that level. It goes down into the Anahazi. Okay? No, this is, all right, I'm sorry. the Azurite, I can read my writing. The Azurite Council fits in here. We are the Azurite Council that I talk about, and that's where we take the name, the Azurite Temple, the Melchizedek Cloister. This is the Riche level of this family of consciousness. Okay, so we go Melchizedek, Ra, Azurite Council. Then here, on the entity level, there's a group that's part of the Azurite Council. It's called the Emerald Order. So when I talk about the Emerald Order, that's what I'm talking about. They were the levels that correspond to the Ascended Mastery levels, but we're not just talking about individuals. We're talking about cosmic families of consciousness that make billions and billions and billions of individuals and races and things. So we each have our level and affiliation. We each have an identity part that corresponds to some level of some family of consciousness, all the way up the scale. So this is when the words that I talk about when I say the affiliation, what I'm affiliated with and that many people in this group are affiliated with. This is the lineup of your family tree of consciousness from down here working all the way up, and I'm working downward. So these are the levels in the Ascended Mastery levels, the closest expansions to Source. They're the levels of consciousness you'll pass through on your journey out of here. It may be this time, it may be after you spend some time going into the higher harmonics. When we get into the time matrix, where we have our Rishi identity, the family of consciousess there, the universal family of consciousness that the human lineage came out of, is called the Elohai. Now, the Elohim that many of us have heard of, we try not to use the word Elohim because some of them disengage their connection at this level because they didn't want to have to follow the law of one. They went into dominion of other races instead of cooperation. And we do make a distinction. We try to refer to either the High Council Elohim, which would be the Elohai, or just call them the Elohai, whichever. They would represent on the whole family lineup of the human lineage the Rishi level. The Elohai created the Anahazi lyrics, which were the original liquid light avatars that began the pre-matter forms for the hominid races that became the Taurasians. They also became other things. They went into the Syrian strains and different strains. They are the core seed race of hominid-type beings that all other races, even the stellar races, were created out of. Even the draconian matrix that I talk about sometimes was created out of that matrix. It was a distortion of that matrix that created those negatives that we call negative energies because their agenda is not to have us evolve back into expansion. When we get down to, alright, so on the avatar level, we would have the Anahazi Lyran founder race. That would be considered a founder race out of the Elohai Rishi. Okay, coming down from that into the oversoul level, into harmonic 3, the Anahazi created, among other things, they created Orpheum. This is where, when I talk about the Orpheum, that's the oversoul level of the human race family. Not just your own, but so you would have your own oversoul that would be a part of that somewhere. There are other oversouls that are created out of the Anahazi, so you might be part of one of those. You're not necessarily in this lineup. But the lineup I'm talking about is the pure lineup of the original human pattern, 12-strand DNA pattern. Okay, when we come down from the Orpheum, we get to harmonic 2, which is where Tara happened. That's where we have the Orpheum creating the Turanisium 1, that was the original name for the human lineage. And then out of the Turanisium in harmonic 1, we have the Turanisium 2, or the 12 tribes that are the lineage here that have evolved on Earth. So that is the original lineup of the human family. The lineup is important because there are many other offshoots of this that could happen and have happened. But this lineup carries the scalar signatures of the original pattern that will progressively allow a being from any one of these levels to re-expand back up to the next level. They hold the codes of what's called ascension. Ascension is an interesting word because in one sense, yes, you are ascending dimensionally, you're going up. Sort of. You're really expanding. So it's more expansion than ascension. You're expanding back into what you once were before you fragmented yourself into individuation. That's the process we're involved with ascension. But ascension is kind of the standard word used for it. So what we are teaching really is the science of learning to put those scalar codings back together. Those scalar codings are reflected in the DNA. Keepers of the Flame, the Emerald Order, and numerous other groups are committed to keeping those scalar grids intact. Because if they all became distorted, a being down in any one of the other levels would lose its direct ability to expand back into at one with Source. So they're keepers of the ability of full expansion back into oneness. Now, in relation to the human lineage, the Keepers of the Flame that are involved with Earth have very, very ancient agreements that they made with those higher councils up in the Ascended Masters levels. They agreed to keep coming back and bringing information back at specific times. They also have had a direct hand in what we call the Amente Rescue Mission, which anybody that has read Voyagers 2, we talk about how there were problems on Tara, and because of that, some of the souls and people on Tara fragmented down here into Harmonic 1 on Earth and didn't have a way to evolve out. The Emerald Order, the Azurite Council of the Rock Confederacy of the Melchizedek Cloister, which is the lineup on the Ascended Master levels, chose to intervene and create as an option the Amente Rescue Mission, which means they created a set of stargates within the stargates that already exist within the planets, but stargates that would have the scalar coding that would allow this race stuck down here to re-evolve back into its original pattern. The stargates get into levels of physics and scalar grid mechanics and the mechanics of vibrational science that is very far beyond stuff that's taught here now. How close am I in time? Just tell me, anybody.
25 minutes.
Okay.
It's only 7.
It's only 7. Good. I can go forever, you know that, so I just want to keep track. Anyway, this lineup of Melchizedek Cloister, Rock Confederacy, Emerald Order, and everything, we agreed to maintain the integrity of the stargates, which means we had to know the mechanics of how stargates work, which means it's much more challenging than just understanding what the mechanics are within a body of the ascension process. We had to be aware of planetary bodies and how they worked in order to get permission from the highest councils to orchestrate the Amente Rescue Mission. Certain things had to be agreed to. The Amente Rescue Mission, because it involved the creation of stargates within stargates, and these particular stargates had a vertical alignment that went right through, would take you, if you forget the little body in the middle of this and look at this as a dimensional, as the structure of a time matrix, right at the center you'd have D8, the 8th dimension. Through that point you could come out the other side and get into the outer levels here of energy matrix, and from there go into other time matrices. So the stargates that lead up into D8, and they go in through the stargates in the planetary core of the star Mintaka in the Orion system, they are very, very vulnerable, and they're always under very high galactic security by the Ascended Masters levels. Because if something negative happens in a time matrix, and it gets controlled by negative forces that are eroding the evolution of all of the races in there, that gets out. It's like a virus that spreads in a computer. It can take down many, many systems. So they're under high security. For the Emerald Order to get permission to assist the stellar races by creating the Amente Project, we had to agree to maintain a security system on the stargates, and that's what we have done. And for eons upon eons, there have been groups of us returning to release the security seals on the stargates. If we do not show up on planet, if something goes wrong and we're wiped out on planet, those seals don't lift, the stargates don't open in a stellar activation cycle, and the planet goes into pole tilt to clear whatever's on it. Because we will always, some members of us will always be present when it's time to lift those seals. And if all goes well, the seals will be lifted. So the mission that we're on, it's not just your typical spiritual mission. It is very spiritual. It's also very science. It's a level of responsibility that most spiritual groups don't have to worry about. They don't have to worry about planetary grid mechanics. They might have a little bit to do here, a little bit to do there. But we're the ones that accepted responsibility. And I'm saying we because, as you know, I represent a collective. I'm not saying necessarily you. You can decide whether or not you're part of that. But I wanted you to understand the largeness of what we're dealing with here. The things that we have been doing on the sites are part of those advanced planetary grid mechanics. To get down into the specific physics of it would take several years, forget just a few workshops, to explain piece by piece what's being done. Some of you that have had some of the chelantic science study and that are studying with our healing will get a better idea for what's going on, because you understand things like flashline sequences, and you understand things like particle, particate, and particum, and how they behave, and the fusion of particles and antiparticles, and all this stuff. You're getting some education in that. We don't have time in this framework to give people that just came into it that education. But this is what we are doing. The human body and the human mind are electromagnetic and scalar phenomena, so therefore they have the ability to interact with and direct scalar phenomena that are part of the Earth grid. That is what we're doing. When we went into several temples, it was kind of fun this time because I knew that there were things that needed to be done, and some of the things the council that I work for just didn't bother telling me. They knew when I get on site it would become apparent. Like when we bounced the thing out of the shark fin statue. That they didn't tell me about. That was a good thing that we did because a couple things came out of it. First of all, we recoded that area of the planetary grid back into its original scalar pattern. The planet, just like people, just like families of consciousness, have a specific signature of scalar wave grids that will take them into expansion. If there's distortion in those grids, they get stuck at that level. This planet has been stuck literally in the lower harmonics for 669,000 years. We talked about that a little bit last night during the temple war periods of this last seeding. The imprint of the scalar template for harmonic 4 of the planet had been destroyed. And therefore, this planet could not connect to the rest of the levels up above that. 200,000 years ago, or 210,216 specifically, the Emerald Order came in to fix that. It was during another one of the Temple Wars period, the Azurite-Orion Wars. Yeah, Azurite, that's us. We were taking on the draconian forces from the Orion system, who were insistent on taking control of the planet to get control of Amente. In all of the times that we've had to do battle in the polarity dramas, it's trying to work out polarities. The Emerald Order does not endorse violence nor attacking other things, but it is not foolish enough to endorse total passivity, sitting there and letting something annihilate you. That's not what it's about either. It's learning to balance your own power and handle your own power. So we have had at times wars over who was going to control Amente, who was going to direct human evolution, where humans going to be able to evolve. When we came in 200,000 years ago, we came in to reset the grid of our antenna, which was the planetary grid at harmonic 4 that belonged with this planet. We came in to recode it, to bring in pieces through the DNA that we carry, the little portions of the scalar coding that would reform that grid and plug it back into the Earth grid. We didn't get a chance to do that because we got wiped out that time. When that happens, and many of us got stuck here and had to go through incarnational cycles here and pull ourselves back together before we could even get out. So it was a real mess that time. When we came back this time, we came back to assist humanity because it's in a lot of trouble right now and doesn't even know it with all of the visitors it's having that are trying to mess with him again. But the big thing we came back to do was do what we didn't get done 200,000 years ago. The reason it took so long was because those stargates were not able to open until this time. This is the first time we've been able to recode it. So the work you've been doing is part of a huge evolutionary plan. It may seem silly and like we're running these energies and it makes no sense and this kind of stuff. Oh, it makes a lot of sense. It may take you a while to really get into the consciousness space to understand just how much sense it makes. But we are trying to bring back the harmonic 4 imprint to this planet so this planet can once again become an expansion or ascension planet. Because it hasn't been. It's been stuck in its own evolution. And when a planet's stuck in its evolution, so will be the consciousness on it. So as we assist the planet in realigning its scalar grids, we are assisting everything that grows on this planet, and evolves on this planet, in having that opportunity to realign themselves as well. If you want to look at it very simply, harmonic universe 4, which is dimensions 12, 11, and 10, can be viewed as the Christos. It's the liquid light pre-matter area where you make the transition either into form from wave pattern or back out of form into wave pattern pure consciousness. The Christos is what the whole Christ stories were meant to teach us about, but that kind of got lost in the translation. So to look at what we have been doing very simply, we are resetting the Christos grid within this planet. We are returning the Christed grid to this planet. So it can evolve to be a Christed planet, which is a planet that is able to transmute and expand back into the full oneness of Source. And it also is a place where consciousness can therefore evolve to do that. So you're part of a huge mission. I wanted you to understand what the keepers are and what they do. So it's not just some like ego trip about, this group or whatever they are. It's a very specific contract. It's a very real situation. And the more you expand your own consciousness, the more you'll get a feel for that. It's probably doubtful that anybody that has been drawn to this trip doesn't fit into that framework somewhere. It's kind of like a keeper's meeting.
What's the difference between light workers and keepers of the flame?
Not all light workers are keepers of the flame, and not all light workers, even if they call themselves that, are actually working with light. They may be working with frequency. But if they don't understand these frameworks, they're not going to understand what's motivating them from the higher levels. So many times, especially these days, light workers are being tricked. Because right now, we are in a power struggle over who's going to control the planetary grids when the Amente Stargates open. There are many negative forces, and negative only in the sense that they do not want this to be an essential planet, and they do not want the consciousness here to become free so it can expand. That's the only reason they're negative, just because of their agenda. But they are, wait, I just lost my train of thought, I'm sorry, wait. Rephrase that.
What's the difference between light workers and keepers of the flame? You were talking about the light workers that are co-opted into other matrices.
And they're getting messed with right now. The difference between the light workers and keepers of the flame. Keepers of the flame know what they're doing. That was Zara. Okay, I had a little interference there. What just happened? Zara wanted to comment on that. And she was taking a little advice from somebody who earlier said sometimes you can say, a million things in one short sentence. And that was somebody who had said that to me, and they're absolutely right. It's not that light workers don't really know what they're doing. Down here, they know what they're doing down here. But very few of them understand the structure of cosmic family affiliations. They wouldn't be able to tell an Elohim matrix from a Draconian matrix if it looked them in the face, unless they're trained on at least 12 dimensions to sense the frequency behind it. They can have an illusion hung before their eyes or hung in their heads. Things can present themselves as angels and all sorts of stuff. And they will think it's light. They will think it's of the light. They will think it's helpful. That does not mean it is. The Keepers of the Flame are a group that accepted the responsibility for learning how it worked. And it is a responsibility. It's like, are you going to sit through chemistry class or no? Are you going to sit through physics class or no? Some people will, some people won't. The ones who become good chemists or good physicists sit there. They learn, and they learn to do it well. Not everybody's ready for that commitment, so that would be the difference. Okay? The grid mechanics that we got involved with today, this was a big victory, actually, and it went very, very smoothly. There was a little interference thrown in there with some misinterpretation of things that I'd said earlier that had nothing to do with what I said, and it was not accidental. There was a little bit of manipulation of somebody here from the negative sides to try to stir up trouble through that person. And I felt bad because the person didn't want to hear what I had to say. We were walking into a situation where this was a programming center, okay, at Kumumbo. That has been a programming center that's been used for thousands of years to make sure the right lineup of scalar grids on this planet didn't happen there. They used it to send bad programming out through many temples, and not just temples in Egypt. It was connected to ley lines, and it was connected to what they call axiotonal lines, which are even deeper than ley lines. And they were using it as a program control area. They know the dark side that doesn't want to help evolution, they know we're coming in to do this. And they know that this time is time for the polarities to balance. For a long time, it's been in their favor. They have repeatedly had control of things. This time, it is balancing. in the whole 15-dimensional structure. It is going to flip over to the light side. So at this point, consciousness living on the planet has a choice. If they understand the framework of the choice, they'll make a good one. But if they're being confused and misled and impulsed, away from knowledge that will lead them to understand the drama, that's when they get into trouble. That's what's happening with a lot of people here. They're being intentionally misled by the higher level ones, the middle level ones, we like to call them, because the high council will not mislead you. They'll help you to learn how to ascend. There's so much interference right here that it's very confusing to tell a light worker from a non-light worker. This group of people has been willing to learn how to tell that difference. And you'll find people who really are very proud of themselves being light workers and they think they know it all. Now listen, I've been around the block a billion times and I don't know it all. So anybody that claims that they know it all, let me see how much more they know than Cathari healing. I mean, if anybody's seen this program and the level of physics it's dealing with, this hasn't been on the planet for over 10,000 years. You know more than that? Great, teach me, I'll listen. People here like to take short little answers and fix-its sometimes. And their ego runs away with it. Where all of a sudden they have a little knowledge and they think they can just conquer the universe. This is very dangerous right now because we need to work as a team, all of us. This is a team that is willing to listen and willing to learn and say, okay, there's polarity here, there's dark and light, and we love the dark ones as much. They're part of the collective. They need healing. They're not going to heal if they kill all the doctors. They're not going to get aligned if they misalign everybody else. So we're learning field integrity, how to hold our own, how to do tough love when necessary. This is what this work is about. You're dealing with a very ancient soul, and the reason you're dealing with it is probably because you're part of it. And I would like each of you, and I'm not going to go rambling on about our missions and what we're doing and where we have been. We've come in little clusters numerous times, and whenever they find us in physical bodies, they usually try to kill us. This time, there's protection. This is great. This is what's the beauty of this drama, is this time because both sides, dark, light, and middle, all sides, want the seals lifted on the Amente stargates. We have built-in protection this time. They're not going to take out the bodies. They're not going to destroy us and just have us assassinated. They need the DNA codes. They might like to invade us and do body snatching, but this is the hardest group to snatch bodies from, because we are able to hold a 12-dimensional pillar if we remember how to do it. That's why we're teaching them how to seal. Alright? We are going to be able to finish it this time. And it's a very ancient victory, and a victory for the future races that will ever evolve on this planet. So I just wanted you to understand a bit about the Keepers of the Flame. Think about the fact that some of you know you were part of it. Others of you maybe think, oh, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Feel it out. Try to get a sense and try to ask your ancient venom. Am I part of this? And if so, what part do I play? Because there's always a part you chose to play. You're part of it. You chose it for a reason. There are certain things you chose to do. This will be your wake-up call. This will be your time to say, hey, it's time to find out what I came here to do. And it will be a release for you also. Because if you do, we all have a level of what we came to do. If you have contracts that you gave yourself as being part of the Keepers, part of the people who are the Earth Grid Protection Team, you have very special missions. And you will feel a release and a new motivation to move forward, and you will get the guidance for that direction. The more you work with your personal stuff, it always comes down to you too. Just because you're a Keeper of the Flame doesn't mean you don't have to work your personal stuff. It means, yes, you have to get your field integrity up. You need to learn to expand the DNA. You're still in a body pattern that has dormant DNA that needs to be activated. You may be an avatar up there, but that avatar's not in here yet. You know what I mean? Work with your personal stuff and realize when we talk about scary stuff, you don't have to be scared, you just have to be smart. That's all. It's kind of like a lot of light worker groups get mad at me because I talk about negative stuff. Well, I talk about it in the context that if you're going to cross the street and you see a car coming, would you rather have the knowledge that when cars hit bodies, they hurt them? Or would you rather just walk across the street, get hit, and find out? This is simply the difference. We're teaching you an awareness not to be afraid. We're not saying don't go near roads because cars go on them. We're not teaching you that be afraid every time you see a car. We're simply teaching you that when you see a car coming, learn to stand aside, okay? Learn to handle your energy a certain way, and you don't ever have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid of the dark forces. You can become a healing influence on them. So I would like you to understand the motivation I'm coming from, and also to really think about, as we go through the rest of our journey, we go through our activations, because these things are real subtle now. But I would like all of you, over the next 6 months, just remember, I did this trip in Egypt, we did some interesting energy work. Just observe what happens between now and the next 6 months in your life. Just observe of what changes, what shifts, what growth levels. Some may be subtle, some may be huge, depending on what your own pattern is. Just observe and try in 6 months to look back and say, can I really attribute anything in here, any of these changes that took my life from this point to this point, to the energy work that happened there? You may be surprised at the answers. You may start to really make connections where you say, that shifted. That had to do with that blockage I had in the emotional mind. So you'll start to see where what we're doing now is very valid, because you'll walk through it. And a lot of times the way the higher parts of your own self teach you is they walk you through it first, and then you figure out what happened later. They kind of recorrected my program, because I had it structured the usual linear way, where, okay, we go in, we have 2 workshops, then we do the work in the temple. That's the logical linear way. But the way of the higher parts tends to be throw you through it, you get through it, you learn by experience, then you figure out what you just did. That's what we ended up doing when we were in the temple the first time in Giza. We didn't get to have the lecture, so we went in there, well, let's do this, and I'll tell you about it later. So we're learning to work with patterning of the higher parts of ourselves. We're learning that really all we need to do is just show up and be aware that we're connected to this huge gestalt identity. Okay, I'm getting time, so I'm going to say goodbye in a minute. But show up and open yourself through your pillar to the highest of you. Okay? You don't need to open yourself to anybody else but your own consciousness gestalt. Take that with you. Let it lead you. If you don't know what to do with a situation, simply just stand there and say, I surrender it to my God seed level. Or I always say Melchizedek's order, because I have no problem using the word Melchizedek as that affiliation. Just say, let me be a vessel for thy good work. Let those higher parts of you come in, and it will guide you through the worst of anything, so you don't have to ever be free. And I just wanted to share that little orientation to who in the world is she talking about with you. And we got the time thing that we're on the over an hour, and people want to do their celebration tonight, which will be very good. It will be good to let go, have fun, and just do the festivities. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that and got something out of that. Okay.
They want you for 1 second, man, to tell you what's happening tomorrow before everybody disappears.
Yep.
Take it away, Anna.
Action.
Okay, we're on lecture 4 out of the 5. One more tomorrow. So, this lecture, we're going to try to get it done in an hour. Okay, anybody who wants to be at the lecture is welcome to be quiet. Anybody that doesn't can talk out there. I think we're all here because we want to hear. But we're going to start finally. All right.
Does she have a mic? You have a mic? There is no
That's
mic.
for the tape, but I don't have, that was not something that's an option. Okay. All right. The lecture tonight basically is going to cover a couple of things. I'm going to consolidate a couple of things together because it's going to need to be. It's going to cover what we said in the program as far as the ascension schools, how they've been, like in history, the times that this program, Melchizedek Cloister Ascension Schools, have been a standard part of our history, but it's a history we don't know about because it was part of the secret history. Some of the pharaohs had access to it, some of the cloisters before that, the Atlanteans had access to it, but only in parts. So, I wanted to give you a little bit of history on the program that I'm teaching, so that you'd have some understanding of where it's coming from. It has to be beamed down from space or what? It's a lot more than that. The Melchizedek Cloister Merkaba Mechanics Ascension Program is a very, very ancient program that was used not only here, but also in Harmonic 2 on Tara. It was the science of ascension, or the science of dimensional expansion. And when the races proceeded here, through the precedings that we talked about before, portions of these teachings were always provided in order to help humanity to evolve. So some of us would have said there were times in the first seeding, during the first set of cloister races, when this was used constantly. And you won't find many remains of bodies from way back then because they didn't stay here. They didn't die their bodies. They were able to use this program and get out of here. They were literally able to ascend to terra or higher. So it was standard practice on Earth once upon a time. And with that standard practice, it gave humans the ability that we now attribute to gods. Along the line of losing touch with this information, we have also lost touch with the fact that we do have the innate ability to have these abilities. We've learned to view ourselves as small, finite, animal-type creatures, which we're not. And in the return of these teachings, these Merkaba mechanics teachings, we are going to be one of the first waves of humans in this time frame to have access to these ancient teachings. When I was given these teachings, I was very, very grateful because I had enough memory open of my involvement with ancient culture here in Altara to realize how long it's been since this compilation of information was available to us and how precious it is, because it's really keys to the kingdom. It is the beginning of giving you the mechanics that if you learn just the basic processes of how things work, you will be able to do things with your body, mind, spirit that would be completely unthinkable to a person of contemporary times who has not had this training. You can also go on and teach other people of this. This is a sacred trust that we've been entrusted with, and the groups of people that are the first ones to hear this. It is a trust that's given to you from those of higher evolution, so that you can be an influence. You can help seed these teachings here again. We're seeding them into the earth grid, and we're seeding them into our consciousness of our race right now.
Getting a microphone.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Not really, I'm wired over here. Yeah, is there any
So you should use this. If you
Yeah,
like.
but I'm wired for the audio tape.
Oh, you'll get a sound if you can hear it.
Learn how to be flexible format for me, and I think for all of us on this trip. Anyway, we are in the process of teaching the ancient science that was practiced by the priests of Earth who assisted in seeding this race. It's the first time in over 10,000 years that this information has been compiled in one place, available to one group of people. So when I teach this information, there's a level of humility and absolute gratitude that I have to those who have taught me and reminded me of these things, and the fact that they have used this with me so I am able to at least remember. The other thing, many people know that I talk about my incarnations as if they were like, what I did last year. This is what it becomes for you once you begin to open up your consciousness. I'm not some, special godlike being any more than any one of you are. Some of the potentials that I'm demonstrating now are advanced compared to what average people do. And it's simply because I have been working through these programs, and with these programs, I've been undergoing DNA activation with these programs. And that has given me back what was my heritage to begin with. And this is what it will do for everybody who takes it seriously enough to actually practice it. So as far as the integrity level of these programs, they're awesome. They were practiced through the cloister races in various parts of history that we had talked about in the history lecture in the cloister race period. They were also taught during the Egyptian period in very select little pockets of teachings. The teachings, when you look back at Egyptian history and in their god paradigms, the primary area that you will find in Melchizedek cloister teachings was in the Isis, Osiris, Horus combinations, and later the Hathor combinations. So when you're dealing with those gods of ancient Egypt, the original pure form of what the worship of those gods was about was really at its core bringing the initiates into this paradigm. But along the way it got corrupted and it got taken in all sorts of directions that it wasn't meant to go, as usual. Every time this body of knowledge has been brought to this planet, it has been decimated, destroyed, twisted, and buried. So it was not available to human consciousness because there were forces in the other harmonics who did not want us to have this because they knew it was the keys of the kingdom. If we knew how to work our bioenergetic fields and we knew the science of what it means to be here, we would get control of ourselves and they would not be able to control us. So these teachings, a little bit originally in all the religions, there was a bit of this put in all of them. And then all of them were twisted. The main mechanics information was taken out of them. The Bible, for instance, used to have mechanics. It used to talk about reincarnation and what that really was. It used to talk about how time works. You don't find those books in the Bible anymore because they were edited, and they were edited by the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki weren't the only ones that messed with us. There were other groups like the Ramas from Inner Earth, and some of the Ramas are also associated with Sirius A and Sirius B. So there was a lot of messing with our race evolution that denied us the information that was our heritage. This is the beginning of that information. Working with this, you will begin to open things in yourselves that will lead you to your next level. And you won't need somebody to be your teacher, to be your guru. You might need a little teaching here and there, and the new level comes through and you can learn that. But this is meant to teach you independence and self-sovereignty within your relationship to Source. In the ancient Egyptian periods, they focused a lot of attention on serving to the gods. This was an intermediary step for the consciousness at the time, because at that point, they were dealing with root races and hybridized root races, where there was a lot of genetic distortion, and there were a lot of things that could get a being in trouble when they began to open if they didn't have certain control of their own personality. And it got totally twisted as far as becoming servitude toward the gods, which it wasn't meant to be originally. The teachings as are being given this time are not asking you to worship anything. They're asking you to give worth to higher levels of your own identity, higher levels of your own connection to Source, and reverence for all manifestations of Source, which means for each other, for other creatures, for other beings from everywhere, to acknowledge the law of one. We've talked about the law of one more extensively in some of our other workshops. In very simple terms, it's understanding the physics of what reality is about, where we are dealing with a huge unified field that manifests itself as standing scalar wave patterns. It's a scalar field, but scalar waves are consciousness. They are forms that consciousness can root itself into reality. Beyond that, there is simply pure consciousness. It's an energy force that always was and always will be. There is no beginning or end, and it all happens right now. So we got into this a bit in some of the other workshops. For the people who weren't there, I just wanted to touch base with the law of one. The Melchizedek Cloister teachings are based upon the law of one, and they are based upon the highest levels of integrity and respect for all other things. They are based upon learning the structure in which you exist and learning the structures within your body and your consciousness so you may learn to direct them with integrity and grace in relation to yourself and in relation to the whole. It's a course that's often too difficult for many people. It's a course that requires a sincere desire to raise your level of consciousness and to truly transform your existence. It's not the baby course, it's the master's course. And I know that, and that's why it was always reserved for certain pharaonic lines, and it was held within the royalty. Usually the royalty in the pharaoh lines were descendants of the cloister races. So they had not only the root race strand that they were working to evolve, but they had the DNA strands of 7 through 12. Now back in those days, they didn't have the term DNA. They didn't need it because they understood the underlying mechanics of morphogenetic field operation, and that's what even DNA is built on. So the teachings we are bringing here, we could sit through 20 years of lectures to learn all the details of this, and there'd still be more to learn because you're dealing with universal physics and universal science. But it doesn't have to be so overwhelming that you get lost in the process. So the program we bring highlights the most important things first. If you learn these things, learn to do these things, learn to use these operations, you will be able to expand into the next level. And as you expand, you'll be able to understand more, so it won't be an overwhelming process. Now, when we get into the references in ancient Egyptian mythology with the gods, it needs to be understood, and I don't think even many of the current Egyptian paradigms on this understand it, that these were not mythological gods these people were worshiping. There were visitations at various periods of beings from Nibiru, which is a planet. There were visitations quite often from Harmonic 2, of the Anunnaki races and related races. When the people of those times had encounter with these beings, they were very godlike. Some of them were very tall. For instance, on Tara, an average human can go from about anywhere from 9 to 14 feet tall. They're big. When a person down here would see them, they certainly do look godlike compared to us. They also had abilities like telekinesis. They could move things from place to place. They could do things because they knew how to control their consciousness in better ways than the races down here. Through these visitations from other stellar races, and you could call them ET, you could call them angels, you could call them gods. When you're using those terms and looking back on ancient history, you're really talking about all of the same thing. The only difference between an ET and an angel is the person who is describing it. Because what you're both trying to describe is a being from a higher harmonic universe. Angels basically are the ones from about D6 to D9, dimension 6 to dimension 9, consciousness. You all have a level of angelic consciousness, okay? What we call ETs are ones that are still in body forms of matter that we would recognize. So we have ET going up to about dimension 9. Anything from 4 through 9, you could call an ET. You could also call it an angel. And you have ETs with good agendas toward humans, and angels with good agendas, and you have ones with negative agendas. Just because it's an angel doesn't mean it's going to help you. It still can trick you. This is what most people don't realize. When we get beyond the 9th dimension and into harmonic 4 with dimension 10, 11, and 12, which is where our avatar level consciousness is, that's what we consider metaterrestrial. Okay, and there are visitation by metaterrestrial. When metaterrestrial consciousness comes down here, it downscales itself into an ET form and then to a form that can appear on Earth. So, ETs and angels and all these things we hear about in our ancient mythologies are just another way of trying to explain to people down here what is happening in the higher harmonic universes. They were real. They weren't fake. They weren't illusions of a primitive mind like our snobby scientists like to look at it. They are misinterpreting the data. And somebody better recognize that soon, because the data is coming back to visit. And if they don't realize this, if the contemporary scientific community, and I'm not talking about the Illuminati government people that already know they're here, but the mainstream science refuses to acknowledge these structures, they're going to be in for a rude awakening because we're all being visited. When we learn this paradigm, we learn where things like angels, ETs, metaterrestrials, and those kind of things fit. There is a rational framework where those words and concepts and divisions of identity can fit. So we will learn what that means. When somebody's talking about ETs, it's not, oh, they must be nuts because they're talking about ETs. That would be immediate reference. Oh, okay, well, they must be talking about something between the 4th dimension and the 9th dimension. If they're talking about metaterrestrials, they're talking about something from D10 to D15. And if they talk about ultra-terrestrials, they're talking about those 3 levels of ascended mastery consciousness that are outside of the time matrix. So when you have this paradigm is precious. It's a roadmap. It shows you the relationship between the pieces of identity and between the races in the manifestation pattern. So when we go back to look at Egyptian history, we're looking partially at ET history because it was heavily involved in the Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Hathor issues. We were dealing with beings who came as representatives for consciousness collectives from Harmonic 2 and Harmonic 3. For instance, Isis. There were numerous individuals and bodies named Isis. And actually it was Isis, it was pronounced, it was not Isis. And there's other translations of the same name that mean the same thing. They're not referring to just some big, beautiful woman. Okay? There were numerous big, beautiful women who carried that name, just like if you go to Mexico, you will find many people named Jesus because they honored what that name stood for. The name Isis refers to a collective of consciousness that has its affiliates and it's connected to the Elohistic races that we've talked about in the histories before. They go up to Harmonic 4, and out of that they have Rishis in Harmonic 5. They're connected to ascended mastery, ultra-terrestrial collectives in the higher in the higher fields that are non-dimensionalized. So these are literal matrices of consciousness and the manifestations they sent down to interact with this reality field. Those gods were very real to the Egyptians because they were very real, and it got passed down through their oral tradition, through the written traditions, the existence of these beings. So when I talk about Isis and Osiris, I'm not talking about mythological creatures. I'm talking about matrices of consciousness, collectives of consciousness that stood for certain ideas that have a family tree of consciousness from their harmonic all the way up through to the ascended mastery levels into full expansion to source, just like we have a connection. And when we trace our connection upward through the harmonics, we will find that portions of our own identities are part of those collectives. This is the little secret about the relationship between humans and ETs. It's not just about genetics. When we manifest, anything manifests in the time matrix, it comes through as a stream of consciousness from source through the levels of the energy matrix and forms large collectives of cosmic family identities. And they progressively individuate. Okay, when you get into the time matrix, entering that beam of consciousness through D8, it begins to reorganize itself into the dimensional structure, sending pieces of itself into the 5 harmonics, where you get your soul, your oversoul, and your avatar and your rishi levels of identity. In the higher harmonics, you will have matter density characteristic to that harmonic, be it semi-etheric harmonic 2, or etheric, or pre-matter, or a pure waveform. The stellar races are part of us, and we are part of them as consciousness collectives. Some of our incarnations up there are these ETs that are visiting us now. This is why there are people here that are being contacted by groups from the stellar races. They have not only genetic affiliations to them, they are part of the same soul, oversoul, avatar families of consciousness. So the relationships between we and the ETs is much, much closer than most people assume. We talk about that when we got into one of the workshops we've done before, dealt with the concept of stair-step creation. And this is what we're talking about, the progressive downscaling fragmentation of identity into smaller packages in order to experience multiple time fields, and space, time, and matter in those fields. And there are forms that are more characteristic to each harmonic field. Here, human forms and dense matter biology is characteristic of our present state down here. There are levels of identity where we all share, where we look like silver white beams of liquid light that literally look like beams made of mercury that hold a semi-hominid form. They can shapeshift into whatever they want. At an avatar level, this is what we look like in our home harmonic. And above that, we don't look like any, because above that, we are pure consciousness. We're beyond form. So are they. Just because their biology is a little bit different than what ours look like now, doesn't mean that there's a huge difference between us. They have parts of our own selves. You may have a soul in harmonic 2 that has part of its collective and manifesting as an Anunnaki. So it's not about hating those guys that have mistreated us here. It's about realizing we're all part of each other. The problem with the middle harmonic identities is some of them have lost touch with that reality. And they haven't learned the lesson yet that us little guys down here that they like to mess with are part of their own matrices of consciousness. And if we don't ascend, they don't ascend. If they're stuck, we're stuck. If we're stuck, they're stuck. We need to learn these lessons. If they don't know them yet, we can learn them, and eventually we become the teachers. Just because we're in harmonic 1 doesn't mean our consciousness is inferior or has to be more ignorant than something in harmonic 3. In harmonic 3, you have Elohim fighting all over the place with each other. We could teach them a little bit about harmony. We could teach them a little bit about not being stuck in time like they are right now because of the attitudes they hold. So this whole concept of the gods and ascension and ETs and all that, it all fits into a package and a paradigm where things make sense rationally in relation to each other. It's just when you try to look at it through the filters of science and religion that have been given to you out there so far in this society, it isn't going to make sense because they don't show you where the pieces fit together, but they do fit. Now, when we're dealing with the ascension practices that we are bringing back here, we are dealing with, directly and consciously, some of those higher matrices of consciousness. You've seen enough of me through this weekend, or through this week, where you see me say, excuse me, I'm hearing somebody. I'm not crazy. And a lot of psychologists would love to try to tack labels on me. Good luck to them. Because I can out-talk them on paradigm anytime. I'm communicating with different harmonics, different consciousness matrices out there. I had an interesting experience when we went into the forest temple that my guys, which when I say my guys, the Guardian Alliance guys, that are part of the family of consciousness that I'm a part of, they're primarily, to be a member, an official member of the Guardian Alliance, you have to have at least fifth dimensional consciousness. It doesn't matter if you're down here, but you have to be able to hold fifth dimensional consciousness. It's a stability point in the consciousness. The ones I communicate with are usually from D12 on up. When I check anything or I want information from anything, I go right to the Acadic level, which is that third level of ascended mastery, because that's where things fit. That's where you can see the clarity, you can see what things are connected to what. So when I'm pulling information or communicating with beings, that's where I spend most of my space. I spent numerous lifetimes building up in my morphogenetic field the ability to have those codes, those higher level matrices, so it could be born into a gene code that would hold that kind of information. And it's reachable for everybody. Everybody can evolve that way if they choose to. So when I'm talking to things up there that you don't see it, a lot of you already feel presences and things like that. You know there's something new. It's important to know what's something and what you're talking to, because you can get misled as easily as you can get led. A lot of people think that, a lot of people open a channel these days, and that's good. That shows for strand activity. But they're not realizing that if you talk to a D4 channel, it may know less than you do. And it may guide you in ways that are misguidance, even if it doesn't mean to. We won't communicate with anything as far as guidance that's below D12. It has to at least be an avatar that's connected to a rishi in harmonic 5. Because the rishis are where polarity stops. That's where the silly little dramas of everybody fighting with each other stops. Where you reach a level of consciousness where it's possible to harmonize the polarity below it. So in our program, if you work with it, we suggest you can communicate with those middle ones, but aim for your highest identity level to communicate with, and do not communicate with as far as letting them call the shots. Anything below D12. You can take its perspective into consideration, consider what it says, but don't ever put yourself in a position of subservience to it, where it's in a higher harmonic, so all of a sudden it knows more than you. It may trick you with words, particularly if it has a bad intention behind it. It's trying to make you not fine. You need to be careful. You can learn by sealing your Mahara shield and putting up that pillar to seal your consciousness into your own D12 family of consciousness, where you're blocking out communication for anything that's not organically part of the family tree of consciousness that you came in with. That protects you from being infiltrated and hijacked by anything else. All right? It's important to do that. When I draw information, I draw it from the Acadic level. Everybody can learn now, because the grids are fixed on the planet. They're getting fixed. You can pull up the 12-dimensional pillar. You can seal yourself into your avatar consciousness. All right? That is like a prerequisite if you really, really want to move forward. If you want to become a channel and hear the verbal and see the visual and all that, you do it through the Mahara seal so you don't get sidetracked or misdirected. Now, when we are dealing with the communicators from the higher fields, very often they're parts of ourselves that are in different forms. You may have an Anunnaki communicating with you or tracking you around, and you may be amazed to find out when you go to D12 perspective, oops, that's one of my, what would be future from here, incarnates, or way past from here. Because the harmonics are also different time frames. Basically speaking, it's a little confusing, but basically speaking, what vibrates, I won't use vibrate because it could hear myself. What is of a lower frequency will be perceived as your past. What is of a higher frequency will be perceived as your future, or your distant past. Because in truth, the future becomes the past, becomes the future, because it's a cycle in one harmonic and it goes back up to the one before. You already came down through that harmonic to get here. So You're down here and you have to go back up here, which is your future, but you already passed through here to get down here. So when you get into time, it's a little tricky. But it's important to realize that when you begin opening, you're opening the portions of yourself that may look ET. Because if you start having ET contact, that doesn't mean that little beings in spaceships are coming to invade you. It might, but they may be little beings that are directly part of your own soul family. And it becomes a family issue. If you work with your avatar level of identity to begin harmonizing this, you will find those relationships and issues changing. These are some of the things that if you want the master's program, you're going to have to deal with. If you can't deal with the concept of that ETs exist, then take the junior program. And it'll get you to a point where maybe you'll be ready for the master's program. But I think everybody here is pretty well focused enough to understand this is a level of pursuit that really there's not a lot of parallels to on the planet. This is the master's program. You'll either be able to hold the frequency of this or you won't. Some of you may get to a certain level with it and just feel you just can't understand anymore. You have to push away from it. You hit your frequency saturation point when that happens, and that's okay. For the people who do the long haul of this, you will be able to make transformation happen in your life. And you may even get to be one of the very small group of people who will stay with it till the end. And I plan to be one of those people, because I'm working it right here with you, that actually gets to experience something that's not been experienced here by humans in 200,000 years, which is the ability to walk through a stargate with the physical body. You can pass through by dropping the physical body in death. It's only a transition. Your consciousness moves through. But a very few who are able to get the gene code cleared and activated high enough, fast enough, will be able to experience the literal slider concept. As you see on the Sliders TV show, that is a reality potential. Are we going to have 100,000 people go through? Very, very doubtful. We'll be lucky if we have 100, okay? This is how challenging this program is. But that's okay, because you don't have to go through that far. Any level that you can take on this program will get you to your next level. It will get you a level higher. So it doesn't matter what way you leave this system. What matters is if you want to get out of the cycles of birth and rebirth over and over in the lower systems, this is the fastest way to do it, this program. Now, we had a little, I was beginning to talk about this before, we had a little interesting thing happen in the Horus Temple where our guy said, you have to go over to this section or something here. And I'd already scanned the place, and there was no energy work that needed to be done. But I scanned from about D12 to D9, because that's where most of the interference is coming from at this point. When you get into like fourth dimensional things, manipulating things, they're not even an issue. All right, what we're worried about is the D11 avatars that are doing negative stuff here. So when I scan a place, I come in higher frequencies to see if anything's wrong there. Well, our guy brought my attention to something, and sure enough, when I downscaled to like D4, fourth dimension, I could feel the presence in that space. And we walked in. The girls know a little bit about this, the guys don't, so I'm going to share it with all of you. And it wasn't, we didn't mean to do that, but we were asked to talk to the girls first. Went into this one section of the Horus Temple, and where our guide had showed us, and I started to hear them whisper. It was like you see on ghost movies, and I hear the ghost whisper. Who are these guys? There's somebody here. And I traced the matrix up, and I got a very clear visual on it. It was a group of women. They appeared to be of Egyptian descent, and they were dressed in white garments. And they saw me seeing them, and it upset them a little. They've been with that site for quite a while, and they're not used to humans being able to see them, and they don't like it very much. So they got a little nervous, and then I kind of sent. When you get D4 functional and start running into this, you send a love vibe from the heart. I'm harmless, I'm not meaning you any harm, and you hail them. Would you like to open a line of communication? I'd already had permission from the guardian lines to do that, knowing that they weren't something negative that was going to mess with me. Well, they relaxed with that, and they appointed out their little group a speaker, and they were a group of females, no males at all present. They call themselves a name I can't even translate in the pronunciation. It was some kind of, I don't even think it was ancient Egyptian. I think it was Anahazi, which was the original language. And it was like probably about 40 letters long if you tried to phonetically do it. And asked, what would you call that in English? And they kind of negotiated among themselves what the best interpretation was. And they said, the Virgins of Isis. that works. You know, they're out of the ISIS matrix. This was something the Guardian Alliance hadn't told me about. They'd only told me that when I go into this trip, there's going to be some packages of information I have to pick up, some sites I have to clear, and some interesting things I'll run into. And that's what they did, just left me with that. Well, I put this in the category of one of those interesting things I'm going to run into. I just ran into it. This group of females were very, very sincere, and they had permission to communicate with me from the Guardian Alliance, which means they passed security clearance. They were checked out. They're working a program that it's still a fourth dimensional level program, but they're still connected with their own higher parts through the ISIS matrix. So they're not one of those that are being manipulated by negative forces or anything. Now, the virgins of ISIS wanted to help us with the grid mechanics. Once they realized, they didn't know before what we were up to, but they read it in my field when I came in, that we were doing grid mechanics, and they read that we were going to Colombo the next day. And they had a particular gripe about Colombo. Okay? That was a programming center that we rekeyed the next day. But there was an entity that had been attached to that. And when they say entity, they're talking about probably a meta-terrestrial level consciousness. They didn't say which dimension it was coming from, but I was feeling it out. It was probably a D11 avatar level, but it was connected to an even darker force that these are hard to categorize. There's in the system that I teach, I don't even get into some of the fallen entities that happens on the ascended master levels, because this takes you into dark matrices that it's not going to serve you well to even know about them right now, because if you ran into one, you're not going to take it on. I'm not going to take it on. All right, it's something about the polarities of the way the physics are set up that these things need to exist. But anyway, this site had an entity presence in it that had, for the 10,000 years that the ISIS virgins had been guardians of this location where the Horus Temple now is, before the Horus Temple was built, they were there. They were site guardians, and they reincarnated into the Egyptian cycles and became temple guardians. And they always worked with people in that temple and also some other temples. Well, they had a problem with this one entity. It had taken down many of their higher level, what they considered gods and goddesses. And they had asked the Guardian Alliance if they could help with the grid work, because they wanted to see that site cleared. They wanted to see the number cleared from this energy. And they asked what they could do. And here's where some people misunderstood what the girls talked about yesterday. They asked if they could assist in harnessing off that energy once we released it, to keep it out of the way of the ascension spirit. Only until this cycle cleared. Some people interpreted it as they wanted revenge. We would not endorse revenge. We're so far beyond that, it's silly. And if somebody doesn't understand that about us, well, they don't know us really well yet. But what we did when we went to Colombo is we worked with the ISIS versions. When we released the energy, they did their little thing in D4 with their connections in D5 through D12 and harnessed that energy so it couldn't remanifest itself at another location to start messing up the grids again. Because what's at stake here is pole shift or not pole shift. If the grid mechanics go well, we don't have to experience physical pole shift here. But if they don't go well, it's a very strong likelihood. So they were given permission to get that one out of the way for a while. It was kind of neat, because in return for allowing them to participate with us, they actually look at us in a godlike manner. They're in D4, and they have their specialties of understanding. But they see us dealing with D12 energies, and that is to them like a God concept. So we're actually to them more grown up than they consider themselves. They respect us, even though we're in human form here. But they have an advantage because they're more D4 functional than we are. They agreed to work with us if we wanted. And they have a little protocol. In their systems, they always dealt with only female energy. They won't even speak in the presence of males. And it was a thing not about prejudice. It was a thing of keeping their magnetic coding pure. Where when you get fields next to each other, it starts to change the coding of both. You know, female magnetism will shift the male electrical a little, male electrical will shift the female magnetism. So in order to keep as pure of a receiving magnetic channel as they possibly could as a group, they cloistered themselves off from contact with males. And they still hold to that protocol. And it's not about prejudice for them. And personally, I don't need to do that. And personally, neither does the Melchizedek cloister. But we do honor the belief systems of whoever we encounter, as long as they're really truly trying to work for the light. This group of beings, the girls, as I'm calling them these days, is offering an opportunity, and it was approved by the Guardian Alliance for those who would like it, to men or women, which is kind of a step for them. They're willing to work with both genders. See, we're helping them grow up too. They have a specialty in Helantic science that's dealing with the geomancies and the symbol codes, the scalar wave grids, that's keyed through the heart chakra. So it's learning to use the geomancies for manifestation through the love vibration. And it's connected to, as far as planetary energies, harmonic 2, where we have Venus, there's an energy center there that deals very much with what's the fourth dimensional love vibration. It connects to the higher levels of love vibration. It's a frequency, and it's a specific little type of specialty class one can take in metaphysics from the higher ones that not everybody be interested in, some people would. The advantage of taking it is that they will help you to develop D4 consciousness faster, where you begin to plug in that fourth strand faster. They will help you to hear them faster. When you're dealing with the higher levels that we're dealing with, there's that intermediary zone until you have your fourth strand fully activated and you have your audio on and your visual on for D4. It's kind of like you're down here and you can sense your higher parts up there, but it's hard to communicate between the two. This group can help if you want for you to accelerate that process, and they're completely under the, let's say, protocol domain of the Guardian Alliance. They step out of line as far as if their training is not good for you. They're out, and they know it, and they've accepted that. They want to learn from the Guardian Alliance, but they have a little specialty that can help here. Anybody who wants to accelerate the process of it. It would be, when we do the energy work tomorrow, it would be an extra symbol code, and we use the symbol codes, which are geomancies, which are scalar wave guides that set a certain pattern into your scalar grids that will allow certain consciousness to come in a certain way that gives specialization. They're willing to work with any of us that want that particular code given. If you don't want it, you won't get it. And if you decide you don't want it after you get it, you can just say, I'm done, and it will be pulled. That's the agreement they have with the Guardian Alliance. This was something I wasn't told about until it kind of all manifested itself, through the experiences of going to the sites. When we do the energy work tomorrow, it will be something I'll ask you. You're interested in ISIS initiation is what they call it. It's simply getting a symbol code that plugs you into the specialized information contained in the ISIS consciousness matrix. It's a good level of information that can help you with manifesting here. Their specialty is manifesting things through the low vibration, which means if you try to manifest through the power vibration, or try to force your will on stuff and try to make things happen by force of will, you're not going to have a level up with their system. They won't stop you, but it won't help in the process. You'll just be stuck with what you're able to do yourself. But if you're willing to cultivate, through working with those energies, a real deep connection to other beings, other things, to the planet, the real love vibration, they will progressively give you symbol codes to use that will assist you in manifesting the type of events you would like to see, as long as you're willing to manifest within your whole higher evolutionary pattern. You set the pattern for yourself in the first place. If your soul wants you to go this way, but you decide to go this way, you were part of the soul consciousness that chose for you to go that way in the first place, so you're only fighting with yourself. The Isis virgins have nothing to do with your problems with your soul makers. If you want to go one way and it wants to go the other. But if you're willing to work through the love vibration and willing to align with your own higher parts, they're not going to help you misalign yourself. They're not allowed to if they're going to work with the Guardian Alliance. But they will help you, give you extra little thrust there as far as manifesting. You can manifest money, you can manifest houses, you can manifest love, you can manifest what you need. They'll help you clear the belief programs that stop you from doing that. You don't have to manifest out of survival of the fittest. That's lack consciousness. They'll teach you about prosperity consciousness, which is a lesson everybody on this planet can really learn from. They'll teach you that as you learn to open, trust, and give, the universe will indeed give back to you. They will teach you very special things in the love vibration that we would like to have time to teach you, but in the master's course, under the pressure that we're under right now to get the grid straightened out, we don't have time to teach you those little wonderful important things. We're teaching grid mechanics and ascension mechanics so you know what to do with your body systems. And these other programs are helpful So that's why the guardian line said, fine, if you guys want to teach them this part, it's a D4 training. And we're just going into D4 consciousness here. It's good for us to learn D4 training. It'll teach us some spiritual manners, some spiritual etiquette, learning how to react a little differently to situations out here, coming from the love vibration instead of from defensiveness or from the usual D3 perspective. So that will be offered as an option. I'll simply say, do our guys' initiation? No. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, tonight we'll probably do it after dinner. It doesn't take long. We're going to do the base chakra activation tonight, which is just a real quickie thing that will be done individually. Tomorrow, we are preparing for something that hasn't happened to a group of humans in over 10,000 years. Seriously. This is wild to have these activations progressively done through the week that we've been building up to. Tomorrow's going to be the grand finale. We are going to activate chakras 5, 6, 7 in everybody. And people who are willing to have a Rishi bond with their own Rishi, their harmonic 5 identity, we will also do chakras 8 and 9. When 8 and 9 are done, that will begin the release of the first pineal seal. There are 3 frequency seals on the pineal gland that regulate and hold in 3 Kundalini spirals at the base of the spine that correspond to DNA strands and the Merkaba vehicles and all of that. For the people who are willing to go all the way with it, we ask that you have what's called a Melchizedek ordination. This doesn't mean you have to be a member of our temple. What it means is you have to be willing to work with your own harmonic 5 level identity, Ishtal. Because if we activate chakras 8 and 9 on you and you don't have that Rishi bond, you're not going to be able to stabilize the fields and it's going to rip you apart. So we can't, if we have integrity, allow that to happen. So if you're not ready to take a step with Melchizedek ordination, an ordination is simply you get the coding for the 12-strand pattern and then you agree to have your harmonic 5 self do a frequency seal of your pillar. You know, that pillar you keep building, the D12 pillar, where you'll have your D15, 14, and 13 level self beam a frequency down that will hold the pattern for that pillar to build until you can hold it stable and strong yourself. Without that, if you attempted to release the first pineal seal, you would vibrate yourself all over the place to the point where you couldn't keep mental or emotional stability and you would go into physical crisis. So it's just a responsibility thing. It's not that I don't want to give the highest level of initiation to anybody. You don't have to be a member of my temple. It's simply understanding what an ordination is. It's accepting a frequency bond to your DNA with your own higher identity. Not mine, not anybody else's, but your own. That means you have to at least acknowledge the fact that you really think you have one up there. If you're not too sure, then you're not ready. And that's okay, you don't have to be ready. But if you even feel that, well, maybe I do have that, harmonic 5 self, and I'm willing to trust it enough to allow it to do a frequency bridge to my DNA, to hold that pillar for me till I can build it. That's enough to accept an ordination for those who aren't ordained. Many of you, most of you, are already ordained, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm speaking to the people who haven't had the ordinations yet. What we'll do tomorrow is give a quick opportunity for a group ordination, as we've done in the workshops, for people who haven't been ordained and want to be. And then we will go through the activations of all the chakras up to 7. And then we will go into 8 and 9, and we will release the first seal. It's a transmission that Azara will do through with the help of the guardians of the 12 pillars, the ones that are part of the earth grid. They need to regulate those frequencies when they come into the planet because it affects the earth grid literally when we bring that energy through human bodies. So we will get a transmission after the chakras are open into the pineal gland, which is, we'll go through here. And then another one at the base of the spine that will release the corresponding seals. And then you will begin the process of level 1 Kundalini activation. This is a riot when it starts. It doesn't start immediately. A few days afterward, you'll start to feel some effects. When I first felt the Kundalini spiral 1, start coming up my spine, it was the strangest feeling I've ever felt. It's been a long time since these body cells have been familiar with that feeling. Yours will feel weird too. It's not painful. It's just weird. The first sensation I got right before, and I didn't know what it was. They were letting me feel these symptoms and like, what is happening to my body here? And then I figured it out. And then they said, yeah, exactly. We wanted you to walk through the symptoms yourself so you'd be able to describe it. First thing I got was, women will probably understand this better than men, anybody that's carried a baby anyway. When you get into the last months of pregnancy, you have all this weight pressing down from your down. Your legs get sore, your knees get sore, your ankles get sore. Well, unlike pregnancy, it doesn't last for 7 to 9 months, from the 7th to the 9th month. For me, it took maybe a half a day, where all of a sudden I just had this pressure. It was like this really bizarre pressure where my legs felt like there was huge weight on them. And it was uncomfortable. And I had to lay down, more often that day to just regulate it. And then I fell asleep. And I woke up, and the pressure was gone. And I stood up, and when I stood up, there was this little pop of energy at the base of my spine. And then I started feeling like a thermometer, actually. If you notice a thermometer, how the silver thermometer is, the mercury, one side the mercury starts to climb when it gets hot. That's exactly what it felt like. I felt this cord of thick mercury-like energy start to push its way slowly up my spine, in the center of it. It was as if it was going through the vertebrae and around it. And I knew that once you let it go, you don't stop it. It has to reach its destination. And it took me I timed it was about 22 minutes for it to slowly climb from the base of my spine up to the center of my head. And then hit the pineal gland. And then there's a little pop sensation, not a hard one. And then the pressure released. Because it was not even a pressure, it was I could feel my cells responding, going, ick, what is that? It was just such an unfamiliar feeling. It felt totally foreign. Because the body cells have not had these activations in thousands of years for most people. So it's a really unique and strange feeling. It also had a consciousness with it, where it almost felt like this spiral of energy moving up my spine has an identity all of its own. It's a part of your own consciousness. But you begin to feel that consciousness move up and into your body. Once it hits the pineal, it kind of spreads out, and you just get a burst of clearness, more clarity. And then you kind of go back to normal. But normal is a little more expanded than it was before. You may start having more active dream activity. You may start having more walk into a room, you're starting to see things in D4. It will manifest for everybody in a different way. But I wanted you to understand a little bit about what these sensations are like. We're going through real biophysical processes here. Your soul, oversoul, avatar, and rishi levels will regulate how fast it goes for you. Just be aware that physical changes come with this. If you get aches and pains a little bit some days, don't run to the doctor immediately thinking you have arthritis. And maybe purging things in the cells that need to shift to a higher frequency to be able to handle the Kundalini. So we're going to talk about tomorrow. There's going to be a lecture before we do the activations. We're going to go through the subtle body parts so you know what is what. Okay? I'll show you some of the charts I have with our healing manual to point out where the chakras are, where the crystal seals are. This is all very scientific. I mean, we know what we're talking about here. It's not just vague hypotheticals. So you'll know what we're doing when it's being done. It's exciting that we've been given this opportunity. I'm excited that you're willing to learn and to go through this. It's an adventure that you don't turn back from. Because once you get your consciousness expanding on those levels, you start to look back at what you used to think things were, and it doesn't make any sense anymore. You know more now. It's like looking back at yourself in kindergarten and saying, "Oh yeah, I was sweet and cute. Boy, I didn't know too much. I know a lot more now." Once you start having these levels of awareness come to you, you will not be able to move backward to the levels of consciousness you came from. You'll identify them, understand them, integrate them, but you can't pretend you don't know when you do. And that's when you'll start to realize you do need to deal with the fact that we're dealing with multidimensional structure. Part of that reality is ETs, MTs, terrestrials, UTs, ultra-terrestrials, and all those things. It becomes par for the course. It becomes the new reality frame, the new filter that you see reality through, that allows you to expand. So that's what we're headed for. Those who don't feel ready, you don't have to do it. The chakra activations you had will still get you to another higher level to help you ground your higher selves. But those of you who want to go through are perfectly welcome to do so. I want to make a real quick comment on what we did at, I can say this, at Shepsut's temple, because people have been asking me to address that. I'll address it really, really quick, so they're trying to, wrap this up. When we got on site, Azara knew what she was doing. I had been there before. I've had an incarnation there before, and I knew there were certain portals that connect to inner Earth, but also connect to Sirius B. There used to be a portal bridge between Earth and Sirius B that was used for the second seeding. That's where the consciousness came into birth here on Earth. That was closed down for the third seeding and only used by a certain higher code of consciousness. There was a portal door there. Now, when we went into that site, there had been things done in Hatshepsut's time where certain vortices were opened, but she was killed before they could be closed. And because of that, negative forces had gotten control over them. We recoded them and got the negative ones closed. But we also did something very special, which was activating that temple complex the way it was supposed to be. I can't, it'll take me an hour to try to go into detail of that. But basically, where the people were singing, the area over on this side, we were doing energy work over on this side, and taking this energy work, that, and sending it up into the middle where it was supposed to be done. I wanted us to be able to get up into that center space, but they wouldn't let us up there. So I had to, Zara was running around in my body very quickly, trying to move the energies fast enough to get them together to form kind of like a bridge that came together in the center. And she, with the Guardian's help, whacked it into the energies we built on both sides, whacked it into the center. And she did that for a reason. And when we looked, the reason had worked. There was a doorway, literally, where when this place was activated, a person could walk up those steps, walk through that door, and not come out the other side. When it was activated, it was a concealed doorway. It was a fourth dimensional portal that led up through into Sirius B. And we activated it. So it's functional now for the first time since Hatshepsut's time. And that there was a big cheer that went up for that, because that's been a problem area for quite a while. So it was not only recoded to the Guardian grids, it was yet another possible exit point for those who undergo ascension. For the people who actually make it into that group, whose DNA is ready and they can be taken to the portal places to get on out of here when it's time, when the day opens. That will be one of the sites, right on the top of those steps. So, and there's others. We're going to be opening others too. So I wanted to qualify that because several people asked me, what did we do over there? That's what we did. In D4, it looks like a golden sheet of oscillating energy. It's D8 frequency. And it's really beautiful when you see it open up, especially when it's been like just this dark area for a long time. It just went right up, as if it had never had a problem. So thank you for helping with that. The Guardians thank you for that too. And I guess we'll wrap it up now because we're probably over time as usual. I think we need to eat. So
Where do you want to do the activation? I mean, talk about dining room.
it really doesn't matter. Any place on the boats do it. Maybe if there's nobody down, like outside of
The lobby, outside the
downstairs
dining room.
by the dining room. Yeah.
After
If
you
nobody's
eat.
down there watching TV or anything, we could just do it down there. It could be like a prayer circle for anybody walking by. So they don't have to, we don't have to explain ourselves.
9:30 on that. Say 30 now. 9:30.
Okay. You mean we actually stayed in the time frame? Oh my goodness. I'm in